Hello. Hi, everyone. Miss B. Hanley here. And today we are continuing our summer reading project with Scythe by Neal Shusterman. We have read already the first two parts of this book, and it has gotten pretty intense. So I hope you, if you haven't read the whole book yet, we are going to be getting into some spoilers. So go read it or go watch the other two videos and struggle through me reading it aloud to you if you enjoy that. So yeah, I'm not going to do any fan casting today or any special activities or discussion questions because part 3 is, I think, the biggest part in this book, like longest part in this book. We go from page 175 to page 330. So we're splitting up this part into two different streams, most likely. We're going to be reading the first half of part 3 today, and then we'll read the second half of part 3 tomorrow if I can get to stream tomorrow. If not, I do plan on streaming other parts of the week. So I've got some time blocked off to get through the rest of this book, and we should have it hopefully finished by the end of the week, if not by next week. And then after we finish the book, I would really like to try some different activities. So we talked about making a cast of the book, like a movie cast of the book, because there, as far as I know, there isn't, well, that's something I need to look into. There isn't a movie being made currently, or at least in production yet. I have to look that up. But maybe we can look that up at the end of the book. Also, I would like to make like a vibe collage of this book, just kind of relate this book to other things that I've watched or played or read. Just to give you an idea, if you like this book and you want to read more like it, or play video games like it, or even watch TV shows like it, we can kind of create a list of that. That would be really fun. Additionally, those were the two big activities that I had planned to do. Also, go through some of the discussion questions, because I know that some of my students have this book as a summer reading project, and they have to complete discussion questions, they have to do an essay, and they also have to do an art project. So we might do a little bit of that as well on stream, just to help them out a little bit, give them some ideas, maybe even help them get through those projects before school actually starts. That would be great. Okay, so yeah, we're going to continue with part 3 of Scythe by Neal Shusterman. Very exciting. And really quick, I do want to look up a couple of things. So the first thing I do want to look up is the movie being produced? I can't spell. Movie. Scythe is an upcoming movie adaptation. This is from the fandom, the Scythe fandom. As of January 2020, Sarah Gamble was writing the script. Okay, I like that. Sarah Gamble is she was a director or a producer on Supernatural, which is a very popular TV show. It was on the CW, as I recall. And then also The Magicians. Oh, that was a good show. I love The Magicians. That was on Sci-Fi. And I never saw You, but I heard it was great. I just couldn't watch it. It was a little too it was a little too intense for me. I just kind of stayed away from that. The book, the TV series, I just kind of stayed away from because it was just a little too creepy for me. I really was not into watching that kind of stuff. But love Supernatural, love The Magicians. However, she's not a part of the project anymore. They were looking for a new writer. Ooh, I wonder what happened. Okay, look at this. Neal Shusterman, the author of the book, said he would want Helen Mirren, who was on the cast, a fan cast website that we looked at yesterday, and Meryl Streep to play Scythe Curie. I agree with Meryl Streep, but I feel like I love Meryl Streep. I totally think she would be a great Scythe Curie, but I feel like she's on the older side. But that doesn't mean she doesn't look young. I mean, she looks plenty young because she is beautiful. And then it said Sir Ian McClellan as Scythe Faraday. Again, I feel like it's too old. I feel like they need to be just slightly under like an age, you know? Just like maybe, like they said 40s. I feel like a Meryl Streep maybe could pass. But Ian McClellan, I don't think. Don't think he could pass for 40. Okay. Was that the thing I was looking up? Yeah, that was the thing I was looking up. The other thing, okay, let's see, is now in development. No, that's the references. And Neal himself would love to be the voice of Thunderhead. That would be kind of cool, actually. I feel like if the author of the book were the voice of the like god in the book, I feel like that would make so much sense. That would be pretty awesome. Okay, so September 2020, it was announced that the screenwriter and director Gary Dauberman, who did It and Annabelle, was adapting the film and writing the new draft. Project is still in development and the script is being worked on. So they haven't done any casting or any like production value for it yet, right? They've just been working on writing the script. I don't know him as well. I have seen It. I did not see Annabelle. I was not impressed with It. I think they're talking about the new It too, not the 1980 version. I would have liked Sarah Gamble. It's interesting. I kind of want to know what happened. Because it seems like maybe they had a falling out or disagreements, maybe artistic differences, which is sad. I don't really know Sarah Gamble as a person. I don't know if she's been canceled or anything. But I did like the shows that she worked on, especially The Magicians. I feel like The Magicians the tone of that show would really fit the tone of Scythe. I feel like It and Annabelle is too like horror, but I guess maybe if that's what he wants, that's what he's going for. Sure. Why not? Okay, let's get into reading. I did change some things on the screen, as you can see. We've got our regular kind of synopsis from the back of the book. I changed it. I took out some stuff a little bit and just caught everybody up on this part. So they start training with Scythe Faraday until we get to part 2, toward the end of part 2, where they, Scythe Rand, who is one of Scythe Goddard's followers, raises a stipulation that says that if either of them, whichever one is chosen to be a Scythe, should glean the other as their first act. So at the end of part 1, Scythe Faraday self-gleans, is reported to have self-gleaned, which means he kills himself, in order to free Citra and Rowan from their apprenticeship with him and hopefully avoid either one of them having to kill each other because they didn't get the ring. But the High Blade says 2 Scythes have come forward and said that they would train you instead. So no, you still have to train to be a Scythe and possibly kill one another at the end. So Scythe Curie, who we love already because we've been reading her journal entries through this whole book, she comes in and she's like, I'm going to train Citra. But Rowan is also swept up by another prominent Scythe in the book, Scythe Goddard, who is the bad guy, so to speak. I mean, I don't think that there's any gray area for him being the bad guy. I think he believes that he's the good guy and what he's doing is right, but in the book, he is portrayed as very much a villain, a person who enjoys killing, who takes pleasure in it, who does mass killings, and he's very infamous for it, and he kind of takes it on, and he believes himself to be a new order of Scythe, right? Hence the name of this part, which I have up on the screen as well. Part 3 is titled The Old Guard and the New Order. I'm going to turn down the music a little bit. We're actually going to change the music. I've been trying to find like good mixes. So we'll try this one.
I've been getting paid.
No, not this one. Pause here. Skip this. Okay. Yeah, here we go. Been trying to find some good music to play while we're reading, just to kind of give us the same vibe of the book, but keep getting copyright claimed. I've just decided that it really doesn't matter what kind of music I put on. It's going to copyright claim me anyway. Okay, so Citra and Rowan have been separated now. And we do know that there is some love going on between them, some tension. They've admitted it to each other. They've kissed each other to kind of get it out of the way, but now they're going to be totally separated in their training. They're not going to spend any time together. And it's going to create more conflict. So let's get into the first part of part 3. First half of part 3. Okay, part 3. The Old Guard and the New Order. I have never taken an apprentice. I simply never felt compelled to subject another human being to our way of life. I often wonder what motivates other Scythes to do so. For some, it is a form of vanity. Learn from me and be awed because I am so wise. For others, perhaps it is compensation for not being allowed to have children. Be my son or daughter for a year and I will give you power over life and death. Yet for others, I imagine it is to prepare for their own self-gleaning. Be the new me so that the old me can leave this world satisfied. I suspect, however, if I ever take on an apprentice, it will be for a different reason entirely. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. And she has taken on an apprentice for a different reason entirely. Scythe Curie seems to have her own motivations for taking Citra on as training, and maybe I wonder why she didn't offer to take Rowan either. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe Citra will ask, because now she's going to get to interact with the Grande Dame of Death, Scythe Curie, which I'm sure is very exciting. Chapter 18. Gotta wake up myself this morning. Hang on, let me close the door so we're not interrupted by any cats. Okay. Chapter 18. Falling Water. At the far eastern edge of Mid-America, near the East America border. Okay, so this is interesting. We don't have a map in this book, unfortunately. At least I don't think we do. No, not in this book. Maybe in future books. I don't know. I haven't read the rest of the series. But so far, we know that Mid-America is definitely going to include Missouri. So it could be just the middle of the country. And then East America. So maybe that's like the eastern border. So maybe they make it by time zones. I don't know. That is one of the questions that we haven't had answered about this world, is really kind of the map of what the world looks like now, that there is no like war. And why do they separate it by region? It's really interesting. I feel like I've got a lot of questions about the geography of this world. But anyway, so we know that there's a Mid-America, which is considered Middle America, geographically, and East America, which I would assume would be the eastern border of our current America. Okay, at the far eastern edge of Mid-America, near the East America border, was a home with a river running beneath it, spilling from its foundations into a waterfall. It was designed by a very well-known mortal age architect, Scythe Curie told Citra as she led the way across the footbridge to the front door. The place has fallen into disrepair. As you can imagine, a home such as this couldn't survive without constant attention. It was in a horrible state, and no one cared enough to preserve it. Only the presence of a scythe would bring forth the kind of donations required to save it. Now it's been returned to its former glory. The scythe opened the door and let Citra step in first. "Welcome to Falling Water," Scythe Curie said. Okay, so this is a real place. Falling Water is a real place. So let's go look at it. Not at Tomb Raider. Falling Water is a real place that was built by there we go. Built by Frank Lloyd Wright, who is a famous architect from our age. Right now it is considered a museum, but it is a beautiful place. And Frank Lloyd Wright has some architecture across the country, including in Florida, in Lakeland, Florida. The Florida Southern campus, the school I went to, has architecture from Frank Lloyd Wright. But this house was built like on a waterfall, and it is very characteristic of his style. As you can see, if it is left alone for any length of time, like without any kind of maintenance, the place would fall into disrepair. It does make sense, just because of the water itself being the foundation. Could probably erode a lot of the bricks and stones that kind of hold it up. But it's absolutely beautiful. It's got to be absolutely amazing to live there, right? Just to be able to be surrounded by a waterfall every morning when you wake up, right? So see, yeah, we've already got stories of flood causing damage to the place. But that's just, I mean, like, it's just how it goes, you know? Like, it's a place that would have that kind of damage. But it's absolutely gorgeous. Characteristic low ceilings for Frank Lloyd Wright. I remember there being so much talk about how he was really short, especially when we would take tours at Florida Southern on the campus. People would joke about him being super short because the ceilings were so low. And a lot of people had to like bend down to walk underneath them. But it's absolutely gorgeous. And it is a real place. And it is located in Pennsylvania. Okay, so let's look at the map. See if we can kind of guess where these places are, the new regions of America. So we know that Mid-America includes St. Louis, because that's where they go for the vernal conclave. And I guess Mid-America border reaches all the way over to Pennsylvania. Well, modern day Pennsylvania. So I wonder, I guess maybe East America is like just the coast. That's interesting. I feel like that's a lot of land for Mid-America and not a lot of land for East America. That's interesting. I wonder if there's a map in future books, if they show like the regions in future books, because that's something that's really interesting to me. I would really love to see that. I'll have to get the next couple books in the series. Okay, where were we? Falling Water. The main floor was a huge open room with polished stone floor, wooden furniture, a large fireplace, and windows. Lots and lots of windows. Let's go back really quick, just so you guys can see while I'm talking about it. Nope. Let's go. Pictures, hotels. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to go back a bunch of times. Here we go. Is there any interior shots? I guess this is an interior shot. Okay. Lots and lots of windows. The waterfall was right beneath an expansive terrace. The sound of the river running beneath the home and over the falls was a constant but calming white noise. I've never been in a house with a name, Citra said as she looked around, doing her best to be unimpressed. But it's a bit much, isn't it? Especially for a Scythe. Aren't you all supposed to live simple lives? Citra knew such a comment could bring forth the Scythe's temper, but she didn't care. Her presence here meant that Scythe Faraday died for nothing. A beautiful home was no consolation. Scythe Curie did not respond in anger. She just said, I live here not because of its extravagance, but because my presence here is the only way to preserve it. Which is so admirable, right? Scythe Curie is like the best character. She's like such a nice person. And granted, she does a lot of things that are not nice, which we're going to read about. But she could be angry at Citra for asking that question. And she could also be one of those sides that takes over a place just because she likes the beauty of it. And I'm sure there's a part of her that appreciates the beauty, but she does say, like, if I didn't come here, it would just disappear. You know, this place would just fall to the ground. So the fact that I am here, I can preserve this beautiful place. I can appreciate its beauty, and other people can appreciate its beauty. The decor, this is a little intense for this, can we skip to the next one? No. Okay, but this is a good soundtrack, so we'll do this one. Okay. The decor seemed to be frozen in the 20th century, when the place was built. The only hints of modernization were a few simple computer interfaces and unobtrusive corners. Even the kitchen was a throwback to an earlier time. Come, I'll show you your room. They climbed a staircase that was lined on the left by layered sheets of granite and echoed on the right by rows and rows of shelved books. The second floor was the Scythe's bedroom suite. The third floor held a smaller bedroom with a study. The bedroom was simply furnished and, like the rest of the home, had huge windows framed in polished cedar, wrapping around 2 entire walls. The view of the forest made Citra feel as if she were perched in a treehouse. She liked it, and she hated that she did. You know that I don't want to be here, Citra said. At last, some honesty from you, Scythe Curie said, with the slightest of grins. And, added Citra, I know you don't like me, so why did you take me on? The Scythe looked at her with those cold, inscrutable gray eyes. Whether or not I like you is irrelevant, she said. I have my reasons. Then she left Citra alone in her room without as much as a goodbye. Okay, so Citra does ask her, why did you take me on? Why did you choose to train me? And Scythe Curie doesn't really answer her fully. And I think this is kind of payback for Citra not telling the truth when Scythe Curie asked her test question. But also I feel like Scythe Curie wants to keep some cards to her chest. She wants to get to know Citra a little bit more before she reveals some of her secrets, and kind of see what kind of person Citra is. And also, especially if someone's coming at you in this kind of like angry way, like, I don't want to be here, I know you don't like me, blah, 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 like all this kind of negative energy, it does make you less likely to want to share with that person and want to indulge that person's questions or even give them anything, because you're just getting already negative energy from them. So why feed into it? Citra didn't remember falling asleep. She hadn't even considered how exhausted she was. She recalled lying down on the comforter, looking out at the trees, listening to the river roaring endlessly below, wondering if the noise would eventually go from soothing to unbearable. And then she opened her eyes to stark incandescence, squinting at Scythe Curie, who was standing in the doorway by the light switch. It was dark outside now, not just dark, but lightless, like space. She could hear the river, but couldn't see even a hint of the trees. Did you forget about dinner? Scythe Curie asked. Citra rose, ignoring the sudden vertigo when she stood. You could have woken me. Scythe Curie smirked. I thought I just did. Citra made her way down toward the kitchen, but the Scythe let her go first, and she didn't quite remember the way. The house was a maze. She took a few wrong turns, and Scythe Curie didn't correct her. She just waited for Citra to find her way. What Citra wondered, would this woman want to eat? Would she silently accept anything that Citra prepared, as Scythe Faraday had? The thought of the man brought a wave of sorrow chased by anger, but she didn't know who exactly to be angry at, so it just festered. Citra arrived on the main floor, ready to assess the contents of the pantry and refrigerator. But to her surprise, she found the dinner table set for 2, and steaming plates of food already there. I had a hankering for I've heard this word before, but I haven't said it out loud before. Hassenpfeffer. I had a hankering for Hassenpfeffer. The Scythe said, I think you'll like it. So really quick, we have to look up what that is. Hassenpfeffer. There we go. It is a stew. It is rabbit stew. Rabbit stew. Traditional Dutch and German stew made from marinated rabbit or hare, cut into stewing meat-sized pieces and braised with onions and a marinade made from wine and vinegar. So it's a very distinctive cultural dish from Deutschland, from Germany, and it requires rabbit meat. So maybe, and I don't think Citra knows that, and I don't think Scythe Curie is going to tell her. Okay, so Scythe Curie said, I think you'll like it. I don't even know what Hassenpfeffer is. Best if you don't, Scythe Curie sat down and bade Citra to do the same. But Citra wasn't quite ready, still wondering if this might be a trick. So, this is actually interesting. I wonder if Scythe Curie chose that dish because she is German? She's Dutch? Maybe not. Maybe it's just a thing. Maybe she's just like knows the recipe. Because lots of people will pick up dishes from other cultures and countries and be like, oh, I like this. And it'll become their favorite dish. But that's interesting. It's kind of like her dish that she chooses to serve Citra on the first night that she's there. It's a hearty meal, right? It's rabbit meat, but it is like a good meal to like get your energy up and make you feel good. Scythe Curie dug a spoon into the rich stew, but paused when she saw Citra still standing. Are you waiting for a formal invitation? She asked. Citra couldn't tell if she was irritated or amused. I'm an apprentice. Why would you cook for me? I didn't. I cooked for me. Your grumbling stomach just happened to be in the vicinity. Finally, Citra sat and tasted the stew. Flavorful, a little gamey, but not bad. The sweetness of honey-glazed carrots cut the gaminess. The life of a scythe would be dreadful if we didn't allow ourselves the guilty pleasure of a hobby. Mine is cooking. This is good, Citra admitted, then added, thank you. They ate mostly in silence. Citra felt odd at not being of service at the table. So she got up to refill the scythe's glass of water. Scythe Faraday did not have any hobbies, or at least none that he shared with Citra and Rowan. The thought of Rowan made her hand tremble as she poured, and she sloshed some water on the table. I'm sorry, Scythe Curie. She grabbed her own napkin and blotted the spill before it gets spread. You'll need a steadier hand than that if you're going to be a scythe. Again, Citra couldn't tell if she was being serious or sardonic. Sardonic. Oh, that's a good vocabulary word. Let's go ahead and add that to our list. Sardonic. Sardonic, similar to... Let me look this up on the screen so you guys can kind of see me going through this. Sardonic is grimly mocking or cynical. So it's kind of like sarcasm, except it's like meaner, right? Being sardonic. It's like being meaner with your sarcasm. Perfect. Let's go ahead, go back here. Sardonic, perfect. Okay. Couldn't tell if she was being sardonic, serious or sardonic. The woman was even harder for Citra to read than Faraday, and reading people was not her forte by any means. Of course, she never realized that until she spent time with Rowan, who, in his own unobtrusive way, was a master of observation. Citra had to remind herself that she had other skills, speed and decisiveness of action, coordination. Those things would have to come into play if she was going to... She couldn't finish the thought, wouldn't allow herself to. The territory where that thought led was still too terrible to consider. And obviously, we're talking about the fact that she's going to have to kill Rowan if she becomes a scythe. In the morning, Scythe Curie made blueberry pancakes, and then they were out gleaning. While Scythe Faraday always reviewed his notes on his chosen subject and used public transportation, Scythe Curie had an old school sports car that required substantial skill to drive, especially on a winding mountain road. Excuse me. This Porsche was a gift. She got a Porsche. This Porsche was a gift from an antique art car dealer, Scythe Curie explained to her. He wanted immunity? Citra asked, assuming the man's motive. On the contrary, I had just gleaned his father, so he already had immunity. Wait, said Citra. You gleaned his father and he gave you a car? Yes. So he hated his father? No, he loved his father very much. Am I missing something? The road ahead of them straightened out. Scythe Curie shifted gears and they accelerated. He appreciated the solace I offered him in the aftermath of the gleaning, she told Citra. True solace can be worth its weight in gold. Still, Citra didn't quite understand, and wouldn't until much later that evening. So just like they kind of have to learn about Faraday's way of doing things, Citra's going to learn about Scythe Curie's way of doing things. And Rowan is going to find out about Scythe Goddard's way of doing things. It's going to be really interesting because we've seen this happen previously, or at least like we've gotten some glimpses of these two important characters previously in the book. Scythe Curie through her journal entries, and Scythe Goddard through the little snippets of the gleanings that he's committed, that we've gotten to see in the book. So it's like a little glimpse of what Citra and Rowan are going to experience in this part. They went to a town that was hundreds of miles away, arriving around lunchtime. Some scythes prefer big cities. I prefer smaller towns, Scythe Curie said. Towns that perhaps haven't seen a gleaning in over a year. Who are we gleaning? Citra asked as they looked for a parking place. One of the liabilities of taking a car that was off-grid. You'll find out when it's time to know. They parked on a main street, then strolled down the street, which was busy but not bustling. Scythe Curie's leisurely pace made Citra uncomfortable, and she wasn't sure why. Then it occurred to her that when she went gleaning with Scythe Faraday, his focus was always on the destination. And that destination wasn't a place, but a person, the subject, the soul to be gleaned. As awful as that was, it somehow made Citra feel more secure. With Scythe Faraday, there was always tangible end to their endeavor. But nothing about Scythe Curie's manner suggested premeditation at all, and there was a reason for that. Be a student of observation, Curie told Citra. If you want a student of observation, you should have chosen Rowan. Scythe Curie ignored that. Look at people's faces, their eyes, the way they move. What am I looking for? A sense that they've been here too long, a sense that they're ready to conclude, whether they know it or not. I thought we weren't allowed to discriminate by age. It's not about age. It's about stagnation. Ooh, that's a great vocab word. Let's add that. It's about stagnation, Scythe Curie says. Okay, so stagnation. I think I'm going to add some buttons here. Make this a little bit easier for me. Okay, stagnation is like slowing down, right? Not going forward, not progressing, state of not flowing or moving, lack of activity, growth, or development, right? If someone is stagnating, right, they are just kind of like, they don't seem to be going anywhere in their life. They don't seem to like, I think what she means, like, because there is a specific, like, how do you look like you're stagnating? You're not pursuing anything. You're not feeling like life is giving you any more, right? That's what she means. She looks for people who have like a look about them that just says they're done, right? Everybody. I feel like everybody at some point in their life has been done, right? Especially like at the end of a school year, I feel like is the most done I feel. But I think it's also a philosophical thing. Like, it's not just like you're done, but like you just feel slowed down. You feel like you're not going anywhere. Scythe Curie. Okay, wait. I skipped a bunch of parts. Give me a second here. It's about stagnation. Oh, I put stagnating. Crap. I didn't mean to do that. Stagnation is the word. Stagnation, everybody. Not stagnating. Stagnation. Make sure I spell that right. Stagnant. Stagnation. We'll do stagnation as our vocab word, but the forms of the word, the forms of the word still apply, right? Like stagnant, stagnating, stagnation is all the same word, all the same meaning. Okay. Some people grow stagnant before they turn their first corner. For others, it could take hundreds of years. Citra looked at the people moving around them. all trying to avoid eye contact and get away from the Scythe and her apprentice as quickly as possible, all the while trying not to be obvious about it. A couple stepping out of a cafe, a businessman on his phone, a woman beginning to cross the street against the light, then coming back, perhaps fearing that jaywalking would get her gleaned. Jaywalking doesn't even get you a ticket today, you know? So, I don't see anything in anyone, Citra said, irritated at both the task and her inability to rise to it. A group of people came out of an office building, perhaps the tallest one in town at about 10 stories. Scythe Curie zeroed in on one man. Her eyes looked almost predatory as she and Citra began to follow him at a distance. Do you see how he holds his shoulders, as if there's an invisible weight upon them? No. Can you see how he walks, a little less intently than those around him? No. Do you notice how scuffed his shoes are, as if he doesn't care anymore? Maybe he's just having a bad day, Citra suggested. Yes, maybe, admitted Scythe Curie, but I choose to believe otherwise. They closed in on the man, who never seemed to be aware that he was being stalked. All that remains is to see his eyes, the Scythe said, to be sure. Scythe Curie touched him on the shoulder. He turned, and their eyes met, but only for the slightest moment. Then he suddenly gasped. Hello? There we go. He suddenly gasped. All that remained, But Scythe Curie's blade had already been thrust up beneath his ribcage and into his heart. So quick was Scythe Curie that Citra never saw her do it. She never even saw the Scythe pull out her blade. The Scythe offered no response to the man's awful surprise. She said nothing to him at all. She just withdrew the blade, and the man fell. He was dead before he hit the pavement. Around them, people gasped and hurried away. But not so far away that they couldn't watch the aftermath. Death was unfamiliar to most of them. It needed to exist in its own bubble as long as they could stay just beyond its outer edge, peering in. The Scythe wiped her blade on a chemise cloth, that the same pale lavender as her robe, and that's when Citra lost control. You gave him no warning, she blurted. How could you do that? You don't even know him. You didn't even let him prepare. The cloud of rage that billowed forth from Scythe Curie was so powerful, it was almost a visible thing, and Citra knew she had made a terrible mistake. On the ground, she yelled. With such volume, it echoed back and forth between the brick buildings up the street. Citra immediately got to her knees. Face to the pavement now! Citra complied, overcoming her fury. She splayed herself, prostrate on the ground, her right cheek pressed against the pavement, which was searingly hot from the midday sun. Her view was now of the dead man, just a foot away. Those eyes were empty, and yet staring into Citra's at the same time. How could dead eyes still stare? How dare you presume to tell me how to accomplish my task? It seemed the world had frozen around them. You will apologize for your insolence and be disciplined. I'm sorry, Scythe Curie. At the mention of Scythe Curie's name, a murmur erupted among the bystanders. She was legendary everywhere. Okay, really quick. I'm just going to write this down real quick. So I need to do this for next time. We're going to get laugh track. Laugh track. And a murmur. So I feel like there's a lot of murmurs in this book. Just gotta remember that. I'll try to have it next time. I just didn't have time this morning because I was busy doing this and other stuff. So we'll have it for you next time. Murmur. She was legendary everywhere. Convince me! I'm truly sorry, Scythe Curie, Citra said louder, screaming it into the face of the dead man. I will never disrespect you again. Get up. The Scythe was no longer raging with an earth-shaking wrath. Citra rose, furious at the weakness of her own legs, which shook beneath her, and the incontinence of her eyes, which spewed tears she wished would evaporate before Scythe Curie or any of the bystanders could see. The world-renowned Grande Dame of Death turned to stride away, and Citra followed in her wake, humbled, hobbled, wishing she could take the scythe's blade and stab it into the woman's back, and then furious at herself for wishing such a thing. They got into the car and pulled away from the curb. Only when they were about a block away did the scythe speak to Citra. Now then, it will be your task to identify the man, find his immediate family, and invite them to Falling Water so that I may grant them immunity. She spoke without the slightest hint of fury of just a few minutes ago. What? It was as if the scene on the street had never happened. Citra was caught completely off guard, a bit dizzy, as if all the air had been sucked out of the car. I have 48 hours to grant them immunity. I'd like them to gather at my home this evening. But back there, when you had me on the ground? Yes, and you were so angry. Scythe Curie sighed. There is an image to uphold, dear, she said. You defied me in public, so I had no choice but to publicly put you in your place. In the future, you need to hold your opinions until we're alone. So, you're not angry? The scythe considered the question. I'm annoyed, she said, but then I should have warned you what I was about to do. Your response was justified, and so was the consequence I levied. Even at this end of the emotional roller coaster, Citra had to admit that the scythe was right. There was a certain amount of decorum required of an apprentice. Another scythe might have exacted a punishment far worse. They circled back, and Scythe Curie let Citra off on a side street just a block from where the gleaning had occurred. She would have an hour to find the family and extend them the invitation. And if he lives alone, both of our jobs will be easy today, the scythe said. Citra wondered about gleaning. Citra wondered what about gleaning could possibly be easy. Okay, so this is how Scythe Curie has earned her name, the Grande Dame of Death, right? She kind of sneaks up on her enemies. She doesn't warn them. I don't know if this is how she does it every time, but this particular gleaning that Citra saw did evoke a kind of shock from her because it's not how she expected the day to go. And it's certainly not how Scythe Faraday has conducted his gleanings in the past, right? He kind of prepares his subject. He tells them what's going to happen. He tells them how it's going to happen. And Scythe Curie just kind of like sneaks up there, which is a lot more accurate to how death happens in our world, right? It's sometimes people know about it. Sometimes people know that they have a certain amount of time to live and how they're going to die. But then sometimes people don't, right? They have a heart attack in the middle of the street. They get in a car crash. They have an accident, or, something's wrong and they don't seek help soon enough. So I think like you do see a lot of the different faces of death in this book, which I think is really important. And I think it's also interesting that Scythe Curie publicly shames Citra for speaking out against her, but is still like chill about it. She's like, listen, I know you were right, but don't do that in public because like we have an image to uphold, right? As people who are death bringers, life takers, we have a certain amount of celebrity. We have an image, right? That we have to put out to the public, and we can't sway from that image because then we could lose credibility, could lose power, all that kind of stuff. Because I mean, if you think about it, if you see like, it's like if a kid talks off to their parent or something, right? Like people will judge that parent based on how the kid talks to them. So just a heads up for all you kids out there talking to your parents, right? In public, you're a reflection of them. You are, to a certain extent. When you misbehave in public, people are not like judging that kid. They're judging the parents, really. They're judging the people who take care of that kid, who teach that kid on a regular basis. So, just something to keep in mind. And that's why Scythe Curie tells her, just hold your opinions till when we're alone so that we can have maybe a more honest conversation with each other, one that's not with everybody's eyes on us. The man's name is another alliterative name, and I've been saying this a lot through the videos. Alliterative means that the first letter in each word is the same. So we had Claudette Catalino from part 2. And now we have another alliterative name. I think Neal Shusterman likes them because I feel like there was a couple in dry as well. Barton Breen. You could have gone with Barton Green. Would have been fine. But he went with Barton Breen. I feel like it's purposeful at this point, right? And the other one was a C. I bet you the next one's going to be an A. I don't know. I'm just making conspiracy theories. Okay, the man's name was Barton Breen. He had turned the corner many times, had fathered more than 20 children over the years, some of whom were now over a century old themselves. His current household consisted of his most recent wife and his 3 youngest children. These were the ones who would receive immunity from gleaning for 1 year. What if they don't come? Citra asked Scythe Curie on the way home. They always come, the Scythe told her. And she was right. They arrived a little after 8 in the evening, somber and shell-shocked. Scythe Curie had them kneel right at the door to kiss her ring, granting them immunity. Then she and Citra served them dinner, which the Scythe had prepared. Comfort food. Pot roast, green beans, and garlic mashed potatoes. Oh, that sounds delicious. Clearly, the family had no appetite, but they ate out of obligation. Tell me about your husband, Scythe Curie asked, her voice gentle and sincere. The woman was reluctant to say much at first, but soon she couldn't stop telling the tale of her husband's life. Soon the kids joined in with their memories. The man quickly went from an anonymous subject on the street to an individual whose life even Citra now missed, although she had never known him. And Scythe Curie listened, truly listened, as if she were intent on memorizing everything they said. More than once her eyes moistened, reflecting the tears of the family. And then the Scythe did the oddest thing. She produced from her robe the blade that had taken the man's life and set it down on the table. You may take my life, if you like, she told the woman. The woman just stared at her, not understanding. It's only fair, the Scythe said. I've taken away your husband, robbed your children of their father. You must despise me for it. The woman looked to Citra as if she might know what to do, but Citra only shrugged, equally surprised by the offer. But attacking a Scythe's punishable by gleaning. Not if you have the Scythe's permission. Besides, you've already received immunity. I promise there will be no retribution. The knife lay on the table between them, and retribution. Is that a vocab word? I feel like it is. It is a vocab word. Okay, after I add this really quick. So this is a pretty interesting part of the book so far. She has offered... Can we skip this? Hang on, you guys. I'm skipping this music. It's great music, but it's a little too happy. Here we go. No. This is such a happy song. It's so happy. Can we get more like dystopian? Okay, here we go. What am I looking for? Oh yeah, retribution. Let's switch on over to this. Retribution basically means like there's going to be, there we go. Basically means there's not going to be like a comeback, like or a vengeance for it, right? It's punishment inflicted on someone as a vengeance for a wrong or criminal act, like getting back at someone. Retribution. Usually it's like getting back at someone because they did something wrong, because they did a criminal thing. Retribution. All right, cool. It's on there. And Scythe Curie has just offered for the woman to kill her as a way of repaying the murder, the death of her husband, right? Like she's actually offering the woman a way to like feel better, you know, like to feel like you've done something for that person's death if you are angry at that person. Because I mean, if you think about it, people who have a family member murdered by someone and then you see them go to court or to prison, that's a way of like feeling like you have justice for that person, for your family member's death. But sometimes you have people who try to kill that person back, right? You killed my son or daughter or relative, I'm going to kill you, right? It happens all the time. You see it in history all the time. So Scythe Curie is thinking maybe this will help her grieve. Maybe it'll help her overcome her grief for her husband. She's offering it. The woman doesn't seem too enthused about it, though. The woman's kind of like, I don't know if I want to do that. Because she's kind of questioning it altogether. The knife lay on the table between them, and Citra suddenly felt like the pedestrians at the gleaning, frozen just on the other side of some unthinkable event horizon. Scythe Curie smiled at the woman with genuine warmth. It's all right. If you strike me down, my apprentice will simply bring me to the nearest revival center, and in a day or two, I'll be as good as new. The woman contemplated the blade. The children contemplated their mother. Finally, the woman said, No, that won't be necessary. Scythe Curie removed the blade from sight. Well, in that case, on to dessert. And the family devoured the chocolate cake with a passion they hadn't shown for the rest of the meal, as if a great pall had been lifted. Pall feels like a vocab word, but it's a short word. It's only 4 letters long. And it's not Paul as in the name. It's Pall as in Pall, which means a cloth spread over a coffin. So it's kind of a metaphor here, a pall, right? A cloth spread over a coffin, or a dark cloud covering of smoke, dust, or similar matter. So they think that, or Citra says, like, it's as if the cloud has been lifted, the cloud of grief or the cloud of anger towards Scythe Curie for killing her husband has gone, and they have renewed vigor for life, and they're enjoying their meal. Which, if you think about it, death, and this is going to be the conversation we're having about this book, okay? Like, I'm not trying to be negative or sad or depressing. This book is about death. Ultimately, this book is about dying and death and our relationship to it. And I think that this book very perfectly encapsulates the idea that death makes us more appreciative of life. When we experience death, like someone else's death or the death of someone close to us, it begins to make us look at our lives differently, right? I felt that when my mom died. I felt that so powerfully when my mom died. And I became really grateful for, why is this doing this? I'm just going to get rid of this for now because it's kind of annoying me. But it made me feel more grateful for my life. It made me feel more present in my life and wanting to do more important things and be more kind to people and actually, live, not be so caught up in all of the drama and the politics of life, really, which is what it is. And I think that Scythe Curie, because she has had this job for so long, knows that. And she knows that human beings' relationships to death have changed significantly because the Scythes exist. She's got a little bit more, I think, of a deeper understanding of what it means to be a Scythe, what it means to take someone's life, what it means to be death, encompassed in a person. So I love this. I like that she's very different from Scythe Faraday in very many ways. And I think Citra knows that. She sees it. But she's also doing most of the same things that Faraday did, right? Faraday would go to funerals of the people he gleaned. Scythe Curie brings the family to her home to serve them a meal, to give them solace, like she says earlier, to give them comfort for what she has done for her job, what she has to do. And she even offers them a way to, feel justified, or to feel like that the person didn't die in vain, or, I don't know. She has that insight, and I think she's very aware of it to her and her relationship to her job. She's a great character. After they were gone, Scythe Curie helped Citra with the dishes. When you're a Scythe, she told Citra, I'm sure you won't do things my way. You won't do things the way Scythe Faraday did either. You will find your own path. It may not bring you redemption. It might not even bring you peace. But it will bring you from despising yourself. Then Citra asked a question she had asked before, but this time she suspected she might get an answer. Here we go. Why did you take me on, Your Honor? The Scythe washed a dish, Citra dried it, and finally Scythe Curie said the oddest thing. Have you ever heard of a sport called cockfighting? Citra shook her head. Back in the mortal age, unsavories, criminals, would take two roosters and put them in a small arena and watch them battle to the death, wagering on the outcome. That was legal? No, but people did it anyway. Life before the Thunderhead was a blend of bizarre atrocities. You weren't told this, but Scythe Goddard has offered to take both you and Rowan on. Yeah, that's a big shock. That's a pretty interesting fact. I want to add atrocities to my vocab list real quick. I feel like it's taking up more time doing this vocab stuff, but it's worth it. Atrocities are bad things that happen, acts that happen, right? Like things that cause violence or injury or that are not nice or unpleasant. Atrocities are things like bombings, war, something that causes people pain, something that is not thought to be part of a well-run society. Atrocities. Atrocities. Pretty sure. Bizarre atrocities. Okay. Yeah, I'm liking this music a bit better. Here we go. Okay. He offered to take both of us? Talking about Scythe Goddard. Yes, and I knew it would be only so he could pit the two of you against each other day after day for his own amusement, like a cockfight. So I intervened and offered to take you in order to spare you both Scythe Goddard's bloody arena. Interesting. So this is one of the questions I raised at the start of this part was, why didn't one take both? And now we know that Scythe Goddard did try to take both of them. And Curie was like, nope, I'm not going to let you do that to them. Because she knows, she has a very keen sense. I don't think the word is knows, but she has a keen sense that Scythe Goddard is not a good guy. And that he does these really cruel things to give himself pleasure. Which probably would, if he had two young people that were vying for the ring from him, it would bring him like so much pleasure because he would think of himself as like the prize. It wouldn't be the ring that's the prize. It would be like him being the one who's controlling it and manipulating it, and it would just be gross. And he would probably be the type of guy or the type of person to like pick up on their romance for each other and then just totally destroy it. He would just want to do that just for fun. But it does make me wonder why Scythe Curie didn't offer to take both of them either. Maybe she wasn't allowed to, since Goddard came in and was like, I'm going to take Rowan and Citra, and she was like, no, I'll take one of them. I don't know. I feel like that would be I wonder what kind of conversation happened. That's all I wonder. I feel like, why couldn't Curie take both of them? Why couldn't she take both of them? Okay. Citra nodded in understanding. She chose not to point out that they hadn't been spared the arena at all. They were still facing a mortal struggle. Nothing could change that. She tried to imagine what it might have been like had Scythe Curie not stepped forward. The thought of not being separated from Rowan was tempered by the knowledge of whose hand they'd be under. She didn't even want to imagine how he was faring with Goddard. And we're not going to have to, because we're going to read about it. As this had turned into an evening of answers, Citra dared to ask the question she had asked so inappropriately on the street, before the man's body had even gone cold. Why did you glean that man today without any warning? Didn't he deserve at least a moment of understanding before your blade? So I think, again, this is a very important moment because Citra has already asked these questions, but her approach is different. The first time she asks these questions, she's coming at it from like an attacking perspective or an attacking stance. Why did you do this? Why are we here? You know, kind of like this negative perspective and outlook. And so any answer that Scythe Curie would have given her would have been framed by her negative perspective. But now that she has a little bit more understanding of who Scythe Curie is and how she operates, Citra, is approaching Curie in a genuine way, in a more genuine questioning way. Like, I do want to know why this is the way things are going. I do want to know why you did those things. It's not just a, angry, like, why did you do that? It's more of a, like, okay, I generally just want to know. Which is respectable. This time, Scythe Curie was not offended by the question. Every Scythe has his or her method. This happens to be mine. In the age of mortality, death would often come with no warning. It is our task to mimic what we've stolen from nature. And so that it is face of death. And so that is the face of death I have chosen to recreate. My gleanings are always instantaneous and always public, lest people forget what we do and why we must do it. But what happened to the Scythe who gleaned the president? The hero who went after corporate corruption, and not even the Thunderhead could rout? I thought the Grande Dame of Death would always glean with greater purpose. A shadow seemed to pass over Scythe Curie's face, a ghost of some sorrow Citra couldn't even guess at. You thought wrong. That's an interesting answer because Citra has a point, right? Like, this is the Grande Dame of Death, right? She brings up Scythe Curie's past, gleaning the president, the hero who went after corporate corruption. But perhaps Scythe Curie has been doing this for a long time, and that's kind of a part of her past, and she's changed her perspective. If you think about it, when your full-time job is to go kill people and you don't really you're not enjoying it, like, there's probably a lot of perspective that she has now that she didn't have before. And if she does seem to have a keen sense of what's going on in the Scythedom based on her journal entries. The corruption that's happening in the world does not really have anything to do with the businesses. The businesses are fine, really. She's really looking at the Scythedom and the corruption there, and that's something she can't do anything about. She can't go off and kill other Scythes because that would be against the rule and she would be punished severely. So what do? Right? The Scythedom is corrupt. You have people like Goddard, and we're just going to see how much worse Goddard really is when we get to read from Rowan's perspective. So Scythe Curie probably has a lot of concerns about changing the way the world is, especially when it comes to Scythes, but it's not something that she believes she can do anything about. That's my prediction. Okay, on to the next chapter. We've got a new journal entry formatted again differently than the other chapters. Let's get into it. If you've ever studied Mortal Age cartoons, you'll remember this one. A coyote was always plotting the demise of a smirking, long-necked bird. The Roadrunner. It's not in the book, but I said it. The coyote never succeeded. Instead, his plans always backfired. He would blow up, or get shot, or splat from a ridiculous height. And it was funny, because no matter how deadly his failure, he was always back in the next scene, as if there were a revival center just beyond the edge of the animation cell. I've seen human foibles that have resulted in temporary maiming or momentary loss of life. People stumble into manholes, are hit by falling objects, trip into paths of speeding vehicles. And when it happens, people laugh, because no matter how gruesome the event, that person, just like the coyote, will be back in a day or two as good as new, and no worse or wiser for the wear. Immortality has turned us all into cartoons. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. She's so philosophical, like her insights are so good. And I think this is why it's so important that Citra is with Curie, because her insights about death and about history, human history, is also really reflective in her belief, her philosophy. Okay, chapter 19, a terrible thing to do. Citra wasn't sure what possessed her to bring up the question she had been asked at Conclave. Perhaps it was the unexpected closeness she felt to Scythe Curie after seeing her feed the grieving family and truly listen to their stories about the man she had cleaned. That night, Scythe Curie came into Citra's room with clean sheets. They made her bed together, and just as they finished, Citra said, "In Conclave, you accused me of lying." "You were," Scythe Curie said. "How did you know?" Scythe Curie didn't offer a smile, but she didn't offer any judgment either. "When you've lived nearly 200 years, some things are obvious." She tossed Citra a pillow, and Citra stuffed it into a pillowcase. "I didn't push that girl down the stairs," Citra said. "I suspected as much." Citra now clutched the pillow. If it were alive, she would have suffocated it. "I didn't push her down the stairs," Citra repeated. "I pushed her in front of a speeding truck." Citra sat down, turning away from Scythe Curie. She couldn't look the woman in the face, and now she regretted having confessed this dark secret from her childhood. If the Grand Dame of Death sees you as a monster, what a monster you must truly be." "What a terrible thing to do," said the Scythe. That's the title of the chapter. But her voice was even, not shocked. "Was she killed?" "Instantly," Citra admitted. "Of course, she was back in school 3 days later, but it didn't change what I had done. And the worst thing was no one knew. People thought she had tripped, and all the other kids were laughing because you know how funny it is when someone gets deadish by accident." So they call it deadish. I don't know if they've used this term yet in the book, but deadish is the term that this world uses to describe people who have an accident that kills them temporarily because they come back in a revival center. So dead-ish is the term that you could describe Tiger as when Rowan went to go see him in the hospital. So they can't be fully dead because they come back as a revival center, like the coyote that Scythe Curie references in her journal entry. Because you know how funny it is when someone gets deadish by accident, but it wasn't an accident, and no one knew. No one saw me do it. And when she came back, she didn't even know. Citra forced herself to look at the Grande Dame of Death, who now sat in a chair across the room from her, gazing at Citra with those invasive gray eyes. "You asked me the worst thing I've ever done," Citra said. "Now you know." Scythe Curie didn't speak right away. She just sat there, letting the moment linger. "Well," Scythe Curie finally said, "we're going to have to do something about that." This is why I love her, because she's just like, her response to things is so nonchalant, right? "Oh, you killed somebody when you were in school? Well, we're gonna have to go do something about that." Like nothing phases her, which is why I love her. Nothing phases her. She's just like a rock. Rhonda Flowers was in the middle of a mid-afternoon snack when the doorbell rang. She didn't think anything of it until a few moments later when she looked up to see her mother standing in the kitchen threshold with a look of such abject pain on her face. It was clear that something was very wrong. They want to see you," her mother announced. Rhonda slurped the ramen noodles that were dangling from her mouth and got up. "Who's they?" Her mother didn't answer. Instead, she threw her arms around Rhonda, giving her a bone-crushing hug, and melted into sobs. Then, over her mother's shoulder, Rhonda saw them, a girl about her age and a woman in a lavender garment, clearly in the style of a Scythe's robes. "Be brave," her mother whispered desperately into Rhonda's ear. But bravery was about as far away as terror. There simply wasn't enough time to summon either fortitude or fear. All Rhonda felt was a sudden tingling in her extremities and a dreamy disconnect, as if she were watching a scene from someone else's life. She left her mother and moved toward the door, where the two figures waited. "You want to see me?" The Scythe, a woman with silky silver hair and a steely gaze, smiled. Rhonda never considered that a Scythe might smile. On the rare occasion she encountered them, they always seemed so somber. I don't, but my apprentice does, the woman said, indicating the girl. But Rhonda couldn't take her eyes off the scythe. Your apprentice is going to glean me? We're not here for gleaning, said the girl. Only after hearing that did the terror Rhonda should have felt finally blossom. Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped away, as relief flowed on terror's tail. Whew. Another alliteration. You could have told my mother that. She turned and called to her mother. It's okay, they're not here to glean. Then she stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind her, knowing if she didn't, her mother would eavesdrop on whatever this was about. She had heard that traveling scythes would show up at people's doors asking for shelter and food for the night, or sometimes they needed information from people for reasons she could only guess at. But why would they specifically want to speak to her? You probably don't remember me, said the girl, but we used to go to school together years ago, before you moved here. As Rhonda studied the girl's face, she pulled forth the vaguest memory and tried to grasp at a name. Cindy something, right? Citra Terranova. Oh, right. And then the moment became awkward, as if standing on your porch with a scythe and her apprentice wasn't awkward enough already. So, what can I do for you, your honors? She wasn't sure if an apprentice warranted the title of Your Honor, but it couldn't hurt to err on the side of respect. Now that she had time to let her face and name sink in, Rhonda did remember Citra. As she recalled, they didn't like each other very much. Well, here's the thing, said Citra. Do you remember that day when you fell in front of that truck? Rhonda gave an involuntary shift of her shoulders, like I couldn't possibly forget. After I got back from the revival center, everybody called me Rhonda Roadkill for months. That's gotta be so awful. I feel so bad for her, Rhonda. Being called Rhonda Roadkill. That's kids can be mean, okay? Listen, the names that people call you in school are trauma, okay? It affects us for the rest of our lives. Stop calling people's names. Stop calling people mean names. It is funny, okay? I agree, but just, be nice. Be nice, kids. Granted, it is worse. She could have died, like legitimately died, not just been deadish, but still. Getting run over by a truck was perhaps the most annoying thing that had ever happened to her. She was deadish for 3 whole days and ended up missing every last performance of her dance recital. Aww. The other girls said they did fine without her, which made it worse. The only thing about it was the food at the revival center on the day she regained consciousness. They had the best homemade ice cream, so good that she once splatted just to get another taste of it. But of course, leave it to her parents to send her to a cheapo revival center with sucky food. So you were there when it happened? Well, here's the thing, Citra said for the second time. Then she took a deep breath and said, It wasn't an accident. I pushed you. Ha! Said Rhonda. I knew it! I knew someone pushed me! At the time, her parents had tried to convince her that it was unintentional, that someone had bumped her. Eventually, she came to believe it, but in the back of her mind, she always held on to the little bit of doubt. So it was you! Rhonda found herself smiling. There was victory in knowing that she hadn't been crazy all these years. Anyway, I'm sorry, Citra said. I'm really, really sorry. So, why are you telling me now? Well, here's the thing, Citra repeated, like it was a nervous tick. Being a Scythe's apprentice means I have to make amends for my past bad choices. And so, I want to give you the chance to do the same thing to me. She cleared her throat. I want you to push me in front of a truck. I'm sorry, that's just such a weird thing to say. So it's just a weird thing to say to somebody that you haven't seen in several years. I want you to push me in front of a truck. Rhonda guffawed at the suggestion. She didn't mean to. It just came out. Really? You want me to throw you in front of a speeding truck? Yes. Right now? Yes. And your Scythe's okay with that? The Scythe nodded. I support Citra entirely. Rhonda considered the proposal. She supposed she could. How many times had there been someone in her life she wanted to dispose of, even just temporarily? Just last year, she had come remarkably close to accidentally electrocuting her lab partner in science because he was such an ass. Don't use that word, kids. But in the end, she realized that he'd get a few days vacation and she'd have to finish the lab alone. This situation was different. It was a free revenge ticket. Excuse me. The question was, how badly did she want revenge? Listen, it's tempting and all, said Rhonda, but I've got homework and dance class later. So, you don't want to? It's not that I don't want to. I'm just busy today. Can I throw you under a truck some other time? Citra hesitated. Okay. Or better yet, maybe you can just take me out to lunch or something. Okay. Just next time, please give us some warning so you don't freak out my mother. Then she said goodbye, stepped inside, and closed the door. How bizarre, said Rhonda. What was that all about? Her mother asked. And since she didn't want to get into it, Rhonda said, nothing important, which irritated her mother, just as it was intended to. Then she went back to the kitchen where she found her ramen had gotten cold. Great. That is a fantastic little part of this chapter. We're not going to continue to read Rhonda's perspective, but that is a shift in perspective right there from kind of third-person omniscient with Citra to third-person omniscient with Rhonda. And I love that. I love that you get to see those individual characters' moments and kind of get a glimpse into their attitudes and emotions, because Rhonda doesn't really seem to care all that much. Like, obviously, it was a big part of her life. She was made fun of because of it. She kind of was made to feel crazy because she believed that someone pushed her. And now she's been vindicated, right? Now she's like, oh, someone did push me. I was right. And not only that, but she doesn't really seem to have that much of a need to get revenge, right? Once she knows that Citra pushed her, she's like, okay, well, I could do this, but what is it going to do, right? It's not going to really affect me. It's not going to make me feel any better, really. And she even just says, I could push you in front of a truck another day. Oh gosh, this exchange is like, it's such a funny, like, lightning moment that it just feels so nice in this book of kind of dread and sadness, but it's interesting. It's interesting. And then she doesn't even say it. She's like, I'll push you in front of a truck another day, or we could just go get lunch. We could just go hang out. So yeah. And I think it goes back to Scythe Curie's point in her journal when she talks about the coyote, right? Or all just cartoons, because we splat off a tall building, we get run over by a truck, and we're back 2-3 days later and we're fine and we're enjoying it. And even to Rhonda, like, that experience wasn't super traumatizing, right? She even enjoyed spending time at the revival center eating ice cream and tried to go deadish again in order to get the ice cream again. So it's not like she has a lot of trauma around trucks and driving or walking out in the middle of the street, right? It's not like it's really affected her that much. So much so that it's not even like she cares about it when Citra comes to ask her or to ask forgiveness. Still in this chapter, by the way. Citra felt both relieved and humiliated all at once. For years, she had held onto this secret crime. Her gripe with Rhonda had been petty, as most childhood resentments are. It was the way Rhonda always spoke of her dancing, as if she were the most talented ballerina in the world. Citra was in the same dance class back in that magical childhood time when the girls nurtured the delusion that they were as graceful as they were cute. Rhonda had led the pack in disabusing Citra of that delusion through eyeball rolls and exasperated exhales each time Citra took an imperfect step. So the fact that Citra is more traumatized by her interaction with Rhonda than Rhonda is with her is so true, right? Oftentimes we feel like when we have people who don't like us or people we perceive as not liking us or do mean things like rolling their eyes and, right, every time you do something, like, it sticks more with us than the other person. And this is where you just have to understand that people have their own stuff going on, right? Rhonda, only thing she remembers about Citra was that they didn't like each other, right? She doesn't remember rolling her eyes at her, or even being in the same dance class and making fun of her in the same dance class. She doesn't even remember any of that stuff. So it's all in Citra's head. All of that guilt, all of that worry, all of that like anxiety she's been giving herself for years and years and years is really just from her. It's really just from her, because Rhonda doesn't even feel mad about it. She doesn't even know that Citra did it because Citra was mad at her. Like, she doesn't even know why Citra would do that. She doesn't even ask. So I feel like this is a really great lesson in social interactions, social anxiety, right? The stuff that you think people worry about all the time. Nobody's worrying about it. Only you are, right? You're the only one creating that worry. Other people have their own stuff to worry about, like Rhonda. She's worrying about her homework and dance class and making her mom mad, freaking out her mom. Okay. So yeah, Rhonda led the pack in disabusing Citra. Eyeball rolls, exasperated exhales each time Citra took an imperfect step. The push wasn't premeditated. It was a crime of opportunity. And that one act had cast a shadow over Citra that she hadn't even realized until she faced the girl today. And Rhonda didn't even care. It was the water under a very old bridge. Citra felt stupid about the whole thing now. And Rhonda, that's why I said that. You realize that in the age of mortality, you would have been treated much differently. Scythe Curie didn't look at her as she spoke. She never looked away from the road when she was driving. Citra was still getting used to the odd habit. How strange to actually have to see the path of your journey in order to make it. It was as if if it was the age of mortality, I wouldn't have done it, Citra told her with confidence, because I'd know she wouldn't be back. Pushing her then would have been more like gleaning. They had a word for it. Murder. Citra chuckled at the archaic word. That's funny, like a bunch of crows. See, they don't even think murder is like... Citra thinks of a group of crows when she thinks of murder. She doesn't even think of killing someone. She doesn't even think of actual murder when she hears the word murder. I'm sure it wasn't funny at the time. She did a quick maneuver to avoid a squirrel on the winding road. Then Scythe Curie took a rare moment to glance over at Citra. When the road ahead straightened. So now the penance you've given yourself is to be a scythe, forever doomed to take lives as punishment for that one childhood act. I didn't give it to myself. Didn't you? Citra opened her mouth to answer, but then stopped. Because what if Scythe Curie was right? What if deep down, Citra had accepted the apprenticeship with Scythe Faraday to punish herself for the crime only she cared about? If so, it was an unusually harsh judgment. She had been caught, or had she confessed, her punishment would have been a sort of suspension from school, at most, plus a fine for her parents, and a stern reprimand. It would even have had an upside. Her schoolmates would have been afraid to cross her. So true, right? Like, oh, don't mess with Citra. She'll push you in front of a truck. The difference between you and most other people, Citra, is that another person would not have cared once that girl was revived. They would have simply forgotten about it. Scythe Faraday saw something in you when he chose you, perhaps the weight of your conscience. Then she added, it was that same weight that let me know you were lying in conclave. I'm actually surprised the Thunderhead didn't see me push her, Citra said offhandedly. Then the Scythe said something that began a chain reaction in Citra's mind that changed everything. I'm sure it did, she said. The Thunderhead sees just about everything. What with cameras everywhere, but it also decides what infractions are worth the effort to address and which ones are not. The Thunderhead sees just about everything. It had a record of practically every human interaction since the moment it became aware, but unlike in mortal days, that knowledge was never abused. Before the Thunderhead achieved consciousness, when it was merely known as the Cloud, criminals and even public agencies would find ways into people's private doings against the law and exploit that information. Every schoolchild knew of the information abuses that nearly brought down civilization before the Thunderhead condensed into power. Since that time, there had not been a single breach of personal information. People waited for it. People prophesized doom at the hands of a soulless machine. But apparently the machine had a purer soul than any human. excuse me. It watched the world from millions of eyes, listened from millions of ears. It either acted or chose not to act on the countless things it perceived, which meant that somewhere in its memory lurked a record of Scythe Faraday's movements on the day his life ended. Citra knew it was probably a pointless endeavor to track those movements, but what if Faraday's demise was not an act of self-gleaning at all? What if he was pushed, just as Citra had pushed Rhonda all those years ago? But this wouldn't have been a childish crime of the moment. It would have been cruelly premeditated. What if Faraday's death, to use the word Scythe Curie had taught her, was murder? Could be. Could be. Okay, really quick. I want to take a bathroom break, and then I also want to see how much further I'm going to read today. Just because I know I'm splitting this up into two, and I don't want to spend too much time on the second half of this. Okay, so what did I say we started at? 175? Yeah, 175. Okay, so 175 to 200 is 30. Could probably read about 60. I don't want to read 100 pages tomorrow, though. Okay, so no, that's where we, yeah, okay. Okay, actually, I went too far. Okay, perfect, here we go. Where is the nearest chapter? Okay, so I could either go to page 262 or page 252. Okay, so we're going to try and get to either chapter 25 or we're going to try and get to chapter 26. Chapter 25 or 26 is where we're going to try and get to. Okay, now I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick. Be right back. Okay, we're back. Continuing on, ready into chapter 20. We have another journal entry. This time is from a different voice. As a young man, I marveled at the stupidity and hypocrisy of the mortal age. In those days, the purposeful act of ending human life was considered the most heinous of crimes. How ridiculous. I know how hard it is to imagine that what it is now, humanity's highest calling, was once considered a crime. How small-minded and hypocritical mortal man was. For even as they despised the enders of life, they loved nature, which, in those days, took every human life ever conceived. Nature deemed that to be born as an automatic sentence to death, and then brought about that death with vicious consistency. We changed that. We are now a force greater than nature. For this reason, scythes must be as loved as a glorious mountain vista, as revered as a redwood forest, and as respected as a I messed that up so bad. Okay, so as glorious as a mountain vista, as revered as a redwood forest, and as respected as an approaching storm. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Goddard. Okay, so you know what this means. We're going to be moving away from Citra's perspective, Citra's experience with Scythe Curie, and now we are moving into Rowan's experience with Scythe Goddard. So it's interesting, though. What I think is interesting is that you can kind of look at these journal entries side by side and tell that they have similar foundational beliefs, right? Death is a part of nature, right? That I think everybody can agree on. Even Scythe Curie says that death is a part of nature. Scythe Faraday says death is a part of nature. And now Scythe Goddard is saying it's a part of nature, which is true. But instead of taking it as the act of killing being respectful, like death itself being the thing that needs respect, Scythe Goddard is saying, no, scythes need to be respected the same way that nature was once respected, and especially death. So he's almost like embodying this sense of like bigger than nature, bigger than God, bigger than everything, because he is the one enacting death for the population. So it's an interesting perspective, right? You have kind of Scythe Goddard or Scythe Curie and Faraday kind of going one direction with that fact, and then Scythe Goddard going a completely different direction with that fact. Chapter 20, Guest of Honor. I am going to die. Rowan had begun repeating this to himself like a mantra, hoping it would make it easier to digest. Yet he seemed no closer to accepting it. Even after different scythes, the edict pronounced at conclave. Even under different scythes, the edict pronounced at conclave still stood. He would kill Citra at the end of their apprenticeship, or she would kill him. It was too juicy a bit of drama for the scythes to cancel just because they were no longer apprentices of Scythe Faraday. Rowan knew he could not kill Citra, and the only way to avoid the possibility would be to throw the competition, to perform so poorly between now and the final conclave that they had no choice but to grant scythehood to Citra. Then her first honor-bound duty would be to glean Rowan. He trusted she would make it quick, and that she would be merciful. The trick would be to not make his failure obvious. He must appear to be doing his best. No one must know his true plan. He was up to the task. I am going to die. Before that fateful day in the principal's office with Cole Whitlock, Rowan hadn't even known anyone who died. Gleaning had always been at least 3 degrees removed. The relative of someone who knew someone he knew. But over the past 4 months, he'd witnessed dozens upon dozens of gleanings firsthand. I am going to die. 8 more months. He would see his 17th birthday, but not much more, even though it would be his choice. The thought of being just another statistic for the Scythe's records infuriated him. His life had been a whole lot of nothing. Lettuce kid. He had thought the label was funny, a badge of honor, but now it was an indictment. His was a life without substance, and now it would end. He would never have accepted Scythe Faraday's invitation to be a Scythe's apprentice. He would have just gone on with his unremarkable life. But then maybe, just maybe, he might have had the chance to do something remarkable with it in time. This is interesting. Rowan hasn't really shared too much of how he feels about himself after all of this has happened. And of course, he uses the word lettuce kid, right? The badge that he and Tiger made up, the label that he and Tiger made up about being the middle child. And how they're just kind of like, they're there for roughage, right? They're not really the meat of the sandwich. And just when he started to feel like the meat, it's now been kind of taken away from him again, because now he's put in this position where he knows he does not want to kill Citra. He loves her too much.
Aww.
But I don't think he wants to kill Citra just because like he's angry at the Scythedom. I think he and Citra both have a very questioning stance when it comes to the way the Scythedom is run. And that comes from Scythe Faraday. That kind of perspective, that kind of lens. But I think Citra and Rowan are also their own person enough to decide that, yeah, you know, what's going on here is kind of messed up. You know, what they're doing with kids, with apprenticeships, and how they're carrying out their gleanings is questionable. And I think both Rowan and Citra are really pushing into questioning that. And now he's also talking about, you know, he used to think that the label of lettuce kid was funny, and now he's kind of like sad about it, right? He sees his life as something that's unremarkable, doesn't have any substance, which I think is a good indicator of his motivation to do the things that he's going to do as we get closer to the end of this book. You've barely said a word since you got into the car. I'll talk when I have something to say. He rode with Scythe Volta in an off-grid Rolls-Royce, perfectly maintained since the age of mortality. This Rolls-Royce. Right, so we've got some nice cars in this book. Can I just say, Scythe Curie's driving a Porsche. Granted, her Porsche came as a gift from a family member who she gleaned. I wonder where they got the Rolls-Royce. Where Scythe Goddard and his friends got the Rolls-Royce. The Scythe's yellow robe in stark contrast to the dark earth tones of the vehicle's interior. Volta didn't do the driving. There was a chauffeur. They wove through a neighborhood where the homes became increasingly larger and the grounds more vast, until the residences disappeared entirely behind gates and ivory-covered walls. Volta, one of Goddard's disciples, had golden citrine gems embedded in his yellow robe. He was clearly a junior Scythe, just a few years out of apprenticeship, in his early 20s perhaps, still an age where numbering one's years felt important. His features and skin tone had an Afric leaning, which made the yellow of his garment seem even brighter. I have a thought for Scythe Volta, like a casting thought for Scythe Volta, and I really want to talk about it, but I'll talk about it when we get to the end. So is there a reason why you chose your robes to be the color of piss? Ooh, Rowan, coming out hot. Volta laughed. I think you'll fit in just fine. Scythe Goddard likes those close to him to be as sharp as his blades. Why do you follow him? The honest question seemed to bother him more than the urinary barb. Volta became the tiniest bit defensive. Scythe Goddard is a visionary. He sees our future. I'm much more interested in being part of the Scythedom's future than its past. Rowan turned back to the window. The day was bright, but the tinted windows dimmed it, as if they were in the midst of a partial eclipse. You glean people by the hundreds. Is that the future you mean? We have the same quota as all the other Scythes, was all Volta said on the matter. Rowan turned back to look at Volta, who now seemed to have trouble keeping eye contact. Who did you train under? Rowan asked. Scythe Neru. Rowan seemed to recall Scythe Faraday chatting with Scythe Neru. During conclave, they appeared to be on good terms. How does he feel about you hanging around with Goddard? To you, he's Honorable Scythe Goddard, Volta said, a bit indignant. And I couldn't care less how Scythe Neru feels. Old guard scythes have obsolete ideas. They're too set in their ways to see this wisdom of the change. He spoke of the change as if it were a tangible thing, a thing that, by its very weight, could make a person strong simply by pushing it. Okay, so this is going back to the title of this chapter, The Old Guard and the New Order. I think we can kind of guess who the Old Guard and the New Order is by now. And this is kind of like the really interesting politics of the Scythedom, because you have a group of people who are the Old Guard who seem to believe in traditional ways of doing things and dealing with death in a more somber, respectful way, showing compassion for people, individuals especially. And Scythe Goddard's new order is kind of like, take pleasure in it. Who cares who you kill? Who cares if they're sad? You know, you grant the people immunity, you kill the people you want, and you live the best life ever. And I think we're going to get to see that more distinctly when we see Rowan and Goddard interact, because Goddard is going to share this view with him in the hopes that Rowan will latch onto it and that Rowan will get excited about this new world order and want to be a part of it. And he does this in a lot of really interesting ways. Okay, so I gotta flip the page. They stopped at a pair of wrought iron gates, which slowly goodness gracious, which slowly swung open to admit them. Here we are, said Volta. A quarter-mile driveway ended at a palatial estate. Palatial. Is that a vocab word? I think it is. Palatial meaning like palace, like looking like a palace. I'll bring up the Google definition for us. Palatial. Resembling a palace, looking like a palace. So they're going to the place that Scythe Goddard has stolen. I don't know if stolen is the right word, but he's basically taken it from the what's his name? The businessman that we saw in part 2. I'm taking this over, right? And he's taken over a pretty nice estate. It looks like a palace, right? It looks like it is a huge mansion. And Scythe Goddard, I mean, he's living in this very lavish palace. And he has his reasons. I don't think they're considered the same reasons as Scythe Curie for wanting to stay at Falling Water. So I think Scythe Goddard likes being in this kind of place of almost like he's like a royal subject, right? Like he's a royal person who's living in this estate, this place that looks like a palace, right? Like he's a king, and everybody in there is the court kind of addressing him and stuff like that. And I think he likes that feeling. And that's the reason why he took this place. Trying to think. Palatial estate. A servant greeted them and led them into the mansion. Rowan was immediately assaulted by loud dance music. There were people everywhere, reveling as if it were New Year's Eve. The whole estate seemed to undulate in the throes of a relentless beat. People laughing, drinking, and laughing some more. Some of the guests were Scythes, and not just Goddard's obvious disciples, but other Scythes as well. There were also some minor celebrities. The rest seemed to be beautiful people who were probably professional party guests. His friend Tiger aspired to be one of those. A lot of kids said that, but Tiger really meant it. The servant led them out back to a huge pool that seemed more suited to a resort than a home. There were waterfalls and a swim-up bar and more beautiful people happily bobbing. Scythe Goddard was in a cabana beyond the deep end, his front open to the festivities before him. He was attended by more than one fawning bimbotech. Bimbotech is a word specifically for this book, but I think it means like a robot who is, how do I put this? Like a model. It's the most family-friendly word I can probably use. She looks like a model, and she's a robot. And so when you have these robot girls at the party, that's their job, is that they're programmed to fawn over you. Okay, I'm just gonna stop there. He wore his signature royal blue robe, but as Rowan got closer, he could see it was sheerer variation than the one he had worn at Conclave, his leisure robe. Rowan wondered if the man had a diamond-studded bathing suit in his wardrobe as well. "Rowan Damish," said Scythe Goddard as they approached. He told a servant passing with a tray of drinks to give Rowan a glass of champagne. When Rowan didn't take it, Scythe Volta grabbed one and put it in Rowan's hand before disappearing into the throng, leaving Rowan to fend for himself. "Please, enjoy," said Scythe Goddard. "I serve only Dom Perignon." That's a type of alcohol? Dom Perignon? Yeah, it's a type of, it's Dom Perignon. It's a very expensive drink. Alcoholic drink. I'm not sure what kind. I don't drink it, so I don't. Maybe it's champagne? Okay. Rowan took a sip, wondering if an underage Scythe apprentice could get marked down for drinking. Then he remembered that such rules didn't apply to him anymore. He took another sip. "I arranged this little bacchanal in your honor," the Scythe said, gesturing to the party around them. A bacchanal is comes from the Greek god Bacchus, who is the god of wine and partying and living it up. And so bacchanal is a term that basically means a big party where everybody's living it up, everyone's having a great time, they're drinking, they're dancing, they're having fun, all inhibitions are lost. "What do you mean, in my honor?" "Exactly that. This is your party. Do you like it?" The surreal display of excess was even more intoxicating than the champagne. But did he like it? Mostly he just felt weird, and weirder still to know that he was the guest of honor. "I don't know. I've never had a party before," Rowan told him. It was true. His parents had seen so many birthdays by the time Rowan was born, they had stopped celebrating them. Aww. Poor Rowan. Oh my God. No wonder he feels like no wonder he feels like lettuce. You know, his parents didn't even throw him birthday parties. Sorry if you don't celebrate birthday parties, but I don't know. I feel like if all your other siblings celebrate birthday parties and your parents don't throw you one, that's kind of it's kind of defeating. They had stopped celebrating them. He was lucky if they even remembered to get him a gift. Poor Rowan. "Well then," said Scythe Goddard, "let this be the first of many." Rowan had to remind himself that this man with the perfect smile, secreting charisma instead of sweat, was the man who had manipulated him and Citra into mortal competition. And it's not going to be the last time he manipulates you either, Rowan. But it was hard not to be dazzled by his style. As distasteful as all this spectacle was, it still made his adrenaline flow. The Scythe patted the seat beside him for Rowan to sit, and Rowan took his place at the Scythe's right hand. "Does the 8th commandment say that a Scythe can't own anything but his robe, ring, and journal?" "Correct." Okay, I gotta go back up because I read that wrong. This is Rowan speaking, by the way. "Doesn't the 8th commandment say that a Scythe can't own anything but his robe, ring, and journal?" "Correct," said Scythe Goddard brightly, "and I own none of this. The food is donated by generous benefactors, the guests are here by choice, and this fine estate has been graciously loaned to me for as long as I choose to grace its halls." Yes, graciously loaned is the word he uses. Upon the mention of the estate, a man cleaning the pool looked up at them for a moment before returning to his labors. That's the guy who owns it. That's the real guy who owns it. The pool boy, remember from part 2? "You should reread the commandments," Scythe Goddard said. "You'll find that nothing in them demands that Scythes shun the creature comforts that make life worth living. That bleak interpretation by old guard Scythes is a relic from another time." So, Scythe Goddard brings up a point. The commandments from chapter 2 are kind of vague, right? They can, quote unquote, be left up to interpretation, which obviously you could say that they don't, right? Specifically, shall not, what is this? Shall claim no earthly possession save thy robe, ring, and journal, right? And I guess Goddard is kind of getting the loophole around that because he doesn't own the estate. He doesn't own the fancy car. He doesn't own the food, or he's not even paying the people to be there, right? They all want to be there from their own choice. The estate is being loaned to him, which technically is not true because Scythe Goddard did use manipulation, I don't know if it's considered blackmail what Scythe Goddard did, but he did threaten the owner of the estate. for his to live there, right? He did threaten them. So loan under coercion is not necessarily like, it's not legit. And I think Goddard, it's probably a small part of Goddard that knows that, but is choosing not to focus on it because he's like not interested in following the rules. You know, he's interested in bending the rules, kind of like the way Scythe Faraday bends certain rules. Okay. Even Scythe Curie is bending certain rules, right? She has a car. She has a Porsche, which she didn't technically buy. It was donated to her, but does she technically own it? Okay. Yeah. You should reread the commandments. They're left up to interpretation. Rowan did not offer any further opinion on the subject. It was Scythe Faraday's humble and serious old guard nature that had made an impression on Rowan. Had he been approached by Scythe Goddard with enticements of rock star glamour in exchange for the taking of lives, he would have declined. But Faraday was dead, and Rowan was here, looking out on strangers that were here for his benefit. I'm sorry if you can hear my tummy rumbling. I'm going to be getting some food after this, so hopefully it'll die down. Just chill out for another hour or so. A scythe is a friend to the world. Open your arms and embrace it. It seemed Scythe Goddard had an answer for everything. Oh, wait. Sorry, I missed a line. Back up. Looking out on strangers that were here for his benefit. If it's my party, shouldn't it have people I know? A scythe is a friend to the world. Open your arms and embrace it. It seemed Scythe Goddard had an answer for everything. Your life is about to change, Rowan Damish, he said, waving his arm to indicate the pool and the partiers and the servants and the elaborate spread of food just past the shallow end that kept being replenished. In fact, it already has. Among the party guests was a girl who seemed markedly out of place. If you remember her from part 1 or part 2, she was young, 9 or 10 at the most, and completely oblivious to the party around her as she frolicked in the shallow end of the pool. It looks like, okay, wait, so she's young, 9 or 10. Okay, maybe we'll see a description before the end of this chapter. It looks like one of your guests brought their kid to the party, Rowan commented. That, said Goddard, is Esme, and you would be wise to treat her well. She is the most important person you will meet today. How so? That chubby little girl is the key to the future. So you'd better hope she likes you. Rowan would have continued picking at Goddard's enigmatic responses, but his attention was grabbed by a beautiful party girl approaching in a bikini that seemed almost painted on. Rowan realized a moment too late that he was staring. She grinned and blushed, and he blushed, looking away. I can't pronounce her name. Ariadne? I think. Ariadne. I'm going to just say that's what it is. If it's not, I apologize. Ariadne, would you be so kind as to give my apprentice a massage? Yes, Your Honor, said the girl. Maybe later, Rowan said. Nonsense, said the Scythe. You need to loosen up. And Ariadne has magical hands, skilled in the Swedish technique. Your body will thank you. She took Rowan by the hand, and that killed any resistance. He rose and let himself be led away. If our young man is pleased by your efforts, Scythe Goddard called after them, I will allow you to kiss my ring. As Ariadne led him to the massage tent, Rowan thought, in 8 months, I am going to die. So perhaps he could allow himself a little indulgence on the way. Okay, sorry. All right. Okay, so Rowan is now fully entrenched in Goddard's circle, right? He came to the party, everybody was laughing and having fun, and they're there for him. He's the guest of honor, right? This is the party that Goddard threw to kind of entice Rowan, to like kind of bring him in. He's thinking, okay, this kid's gonna come. He hasn't really had a lot of the same experience that I can give him from Scythe Faraday, so I'm gonna just kind of blow it up, right? drinks, food, pool, people, pretty girls, massage techniques, all that good stuff, right? At the end there, it's really important because Goddard offers the girl immunity for giving Rowan a good massage. That's like it's a bending of a rule, right? It's showing favoritism. It's giving immunity for doing something for the Scythe. So Goddard he's like, when he says you need to reread the commandments, he really means you need to throw them out the door, right? He doesn't really care about the commandments. He doesn't care about the rules that the Scythes supposedly have to go through. He doesn't think that they need to, right? They're above the law. They're above all of the other people in society. Why do they have to follow any rules? That's Goddard's perspective, and that's Goddard's belief. It's what he's going to really push on Rowan, right? We don't have to follow the rules. We're special. We're above everyone else, right? We don't have to follow these rules. So that's what he's really going to try and push Rowan with. Oh, Esme. We didn't get much more of a description from her, and I'm kind of mad about it. I'm not gonna lie. Excuse me. We just know that she's 9 or 10, and that Goddard calls her the most important person you will meet today. That's kind of interesting, right? Who is she? No one's filled it out yet. No one's filled out my no one's filled out my thing. We have a cast for Rhonda, but we don't have a cast for Esme. Come on. I guess. Sure. I guess. I don't know. I really wouldn't have picked somebody. Scythe Volta, for sure. I'm gonna save his picture because I definitely feel like Scythe Volta, Alfred Enoch is definitely Scythe Volta. The other guy I'm thinking of, though, I said I was going to do this later, but I'm just going to do it now, is from the new movie that's coming out, Daniel Kaluuya. He is, I feel like he would be a great Scythe Volta. Daniel. Searching. Man, this website's so slow. It's all the ads. My cast, if this stream ever gets out to somebody working there, please stop putting so many ads on your website. It just makes it go so slow. There we go. Yeah. For sure. I guess maybe he's supposed to look younger, but I feel like Scythe Volta can be a little bit older. Daniel Kaluuya could totally pull it off. Yeah, but those would be my 2 top picks. Alfred Enoch, Daniel Kaluuya. Did I save his picture? I think I did. Okay. I love Volta. I know you're not supposed to like him when you first meet him, especially since he's on Goddard's side, but you're going to see him interact with Rowan the most rather than the other 2 sides, like Scythe Chomsky or Scythe Rand. And I feel like Chomsky needs to be... I want him to look meaner and bigger, right? Like, I want him to be like a literal brick wall. He looks too nice. He looks like the businessman, you know? He looks like the businessman that they took the estate from, in my opinion. I still don't know who this person is. I feel like he's in the book. I just don't remember who he is. I also don't know this person. Why did they cast so many people for people who are not even like that important in the book? I don't know. This website is going incredibly slow though. Okay, so we'll come back to this later. We don't have to keep playing it. Was there another? Yes, there was another vocab word I wanted to add. Okay, so taking a quick break from reading to add another vocab word, and that word is enigmatic. Enigmatic. And enigmatic means like puzzling, right? An enigma is like something you don't understand or don't know, right? It's like a puzzle. Mysterious, right? Enigmatic is like the word you use to describe someone who is being hard to read, or like their meaning isn't fully clear, right? So enigmatic. And that's what he means when Rowan is talking about Scythe Goddard, because his responses are kind of puzzling, right? He's talking about certain things in ways that are kind of different to what Rowan has experienced and what he has learned from Scythe Faraday. So yeah, I remember why we were going to Fancast. Is it up yet? Jake Weary. I vote for him. He is definitely a little bit more meaner than this guy. Really? Dacre Montgomery. I don't know. I don't know about that one. But Esme, she's got to be like 10, right? Okay, let's look this up. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble for this, but maybe not. 10-year-old actresses. I don't know any of these people. I don't want her to... These are like so many old. Who is a famous 10-year-old? Okay, this is a boy. Oh, wow. Some of these are older people now. They're older now than this picture. Abigail Breslin is much older now. This looks like it could be, she needs to be thicker though, right? She's supposed to be like, she has to have a little bit of meat on her, unfortunately, for Esme. This kind of looks like it could be Esme. I want her to look a little bit sassier. I bet that's going to be hard to find someone to be Esme. I'm not seeing any pictures, any like good pictures, I should say. This looks like a girl who went missing. No, she's no longer alive. See? Can't do this. Can't do it. Okay. Let's go back. Let's go back to reading. I don't know who Esme is going to be on my cast list, to be honest. I don't know. I'm just going to have to watch more kid shows to find out. Okay, moving on. How much further do we have to go? Okay, we're at chapter 21. Our goal is to get to chapter 25. Yeah, that's where I'm going to go today, is chapter 25. I am disturbed by those who revere us far more than those who disdain us. Too many people put us on a pedestal. Too many long to be one of us, and knowing that they can never be makes their longing even greater. For all scythes are apprenticed in their youth. It is either naivete in thinking that we are somehow of a higher order of being, or it is the product of a depraved heart. For who but the depraved would revel in the taking of life? For a time years ago, there were groups who would emulate and imitate us. They would fashion robes like those of scythes. They would wear rings that looked similar to ours. For many, it was just a costume play. But some would actually pretend to be scythes, fooling others, granting false immunity, everything short of gleaning. There were laws against impersonating workers in any profession, but no law preventing anyone from impersonating a scythe. Since the Thunderhead has no jurisdiction over the scythedom, it cannot pass any laws concerning us. It was an unforeseen glitch in the separation of scythe and state. However, it wasn't a glitch for long. In the year of the Stingray, at the 63rd World Conclave, it was decided that all such impostors shall be gleaned on sight, publicly, and most violently. While one might expect such an edict to produce a bloodbath, very few gleanings ever took place. Once word got out, the posers shed their false robes and vanished into the woodwork of the world. To this day, the edict remains, but rarely needs to be invoked, because few are foolish enough to impersonate a scythe. And yet now and again, I hear at Conclave the rare tale of a scythe coming face to face with an impostor and having to glean them. Usually, the conversation is about the inconvenience of it, how the scythe must then track down the impostor's family to grant immunity and such. But I wonder more about the impostor. What was it they hoped to achieve? Was it the lure of the forbidden? Were they enticed by the danger of being caught? Or did they simply wish to leave this life so badly that they chose one of the few direct paths to annihilation. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. Chapter 22, Branded. Oh no, that's not good. If you know what it means to be branded, that's not good. Okay, so I think this is really interesting. We're going to continue to read more about Rowan and his experience with Scythe Goddard. And it really heavily mimics what we know happens when a child goes through human trafficking or through a abusive, manipulative kidnapper. So there's going to be a lot of times where I pause to talk about Scythe Goddard and Rowan's relationship, because what Scythe Goddard is doing is textbook grooming. And grooming is a term that is used by psychologists and stuff, but to refer to people who take children, children that are damaged, right, that may be neglected even, and either try to brainwash them with certain ideals or get them involved in human trafficking, sex trafficking, or just child trafficking in general. So as we go through this, the title of the chapter is called Branded, which is something that a groomer or a manipulative adult will do to a person who is beneath them, like a subservient person or a child. And it's a mark. It's a permanent mark that they give to that person to indicate that they are owned by the manipulative, abusive person. So we might see something like that in this chapter. Just a heads up. It's going to get intense. Chapter 21, Branded. The party continued for another day, a festival of excess on all levels. Rowan joined in the revelry, but it was more out of obligation than anything. He was the center of attention, the celebrity of the moment. In the pool, beautiful people bobbed toward him at the buffet, guests cleared the way so he could always be at the front of the line. It was awkward yet heady. Heady, he uses this word a couple of times. Heady basically means like it boosts you up to this level of feeling like you're important. Think about a time when you maybe performed really well in front of a crowd, either in a sport or in a musical or theater performance or some other kind of moment where you had the kind of appreciation of a huge group of people. That feeling that you get from being like, wow, everybody is listening to me and everybody likes me and everyone's cheering me on. That is what he's talking about. That's a heady feeling. It gets into your head and it can make it bad. It could be bad, right? It could be like your ego is getting too big kind of thing. He couldn't deny that there was a part of him that enjoyed the surreal nature of celebratory attention. The lettuce elevated to a place of honor. It was only when the other sides in attendance shook his hand and wished him luck in his mortal competition against Sintra that he sobered and remembered what was at stake. He borrowed brief snippets of sleep in the cabana, always awakened by music or raucous laughter or fireworks. Then late in the afternoon of the second day, when Scythe Goddard had enough, he merely whispered so, and word spread quickly. In less than an hour, the guests had left, and servants began to clean the detritus of revelry from the eerily silent grounds. Now only the other residents of the estate remained. Scythe Goddard, his 3 junior scythes, the servants, and the girl, Esme, who peered out of her bedroom window at Rowan like a wraith, as he sat in Goddard's cabana, awaiting whatever came next. Scythe Volta approached, his yellow robes rippling in the breeze. "What are you still doing out here?" he asked. "I have nowhere else to be," Rowan told him. "Come with me," Volta said. "It's time to begin your training." There was a wine cellar in the basement of the main house. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of bottles of wine rested in brick alcoves. A bare minimum of bulbs lit the space, casting long shadows and making the alcoves seem like portals to undisclosed hells. Scythe Volta led Rowan to the central chamber of the cellar, where Goddard and the other scythes waited. Scythe Rand produced a device from her green robe. It looked like a cross between a gun and a flashlight. Do you know what this is? She asked. It's a tweaker, Rowan told her. He had had the occasion several years ago to have his nanites tweaked when his teachers decided his moodiness had crossed the line into depression. That was 5 or 6 years ago. The tweaking was painless and the effect subtle. He hadn't noticed much of a change, but everyone agreed that he had begun to smile more. Arms out, legs spread, said Scythe Ran. Rowan did as he was told, and Scythe Ran passed the tweaker all over his body like some sort of magic wand. Rowan felt a mild tingling in his extremities that quickly faded. She stepped back, and Scythe Goddard approached. Have you ever heard the expression, being made? Asked Scythe Goddard. Or being jumped in? Rowan shook his head, noticing that the other Scythes had positioned themselves around him, leaving Rowan at the center of their circle. Okay, so Goddard says this phrase, being made, jumped in. I don't know what this is referencing. I've looked it up, and I don't know what this is referencing. What does the phrase being made mean? Being made basically means going through a ritual, which varies depending on the geographical area where the mafia operates. So it's like, what am I trying to think of? What's the word I'm trying to think of? Initiation. Initiation, hazing, right? I'm thinking of, right? So the mafia would do it to make you strong, like initiation, like a gang would do it to make you strong. The gangs of college called sororities and fraternities would do it to bond you to your sisters and brothers, when it just did little more than humiliate you, just give you a collective humiliation. But yeah, it's not necessarily like a good thing. Like, oh, I'm building you up and I'm making you a better person. It's like, I'm going to break you down to your most worst level, and then I'm going to start there, right? And that's what they do, right? This whole idea of initiating Rowan, of breaking him down, is textbook manipulation by an adult, abusive an adult to Rowan, right? That's what they do. They break you down, they pull off all the parts of you so that you're at your worst level, you're at rock bottom, there's no way to go but get up, and then they're going to be your savior. They're going to be the one to pull you out of it, and you're going to have to listen to them in order to be pulled out of it. That makes sense. Being made. Jumped in. I guess he means like being jumped. I don't know what jumped in means or refers to. So he's standing right now in the circle with the other Scythes around him, which is a very intimidating stance to be in. Well, you are about to find out what it means. The other Scythes then removed their cumbersome outer robes. Now down to their tunics and knickers, they took aggressive stances. There was a look of determination on each of their faces, and maybe a little bit of joyous anticipation. Rowan knew what was about to happen an instant before it began. Scythe Chomsky, the largest of them, stepped forward and without warning swung his fist, connecting with Rowan's cheek so hard he spun around, lost his footing, and fell to the dusty floor. Rowan felt the shock of the punch, the jagged bolt of pain, and waited for the telltale warmth of his nanites releasing pain-killing opiates into his bloodstream, but relief didn't come. Instead, the pain swelled. It was horrible, overwhelming. Rowan had never experienced such pain. He never knew such pain could even exist. "What did you do?" he wailed. "What did you do to me?" "We turned off your nanites," Scythe Volta said calmly, "so you could experience what our ancestors once did." "There's a very old expression," Scythe Goddard told him. And he misquotes it. I love it. "To be painless is to be gainless." I'm sorry. It's funny. It's funny how he just, I feel like he misquoted the jumped in and the being made one too. And he's kind of misquoting this one. No pain, no gain, right? To be painless is to be gainless. I guess. Because it definitely feels like Scythe Curie doesn't misquote that kind of stuff, right? It definitely felt like Scythe Faraday isn't as, I don't know, bad at misquoting stuff. It feels like Goddard is kind of hearing things and like misinterpreting them completely. This is not necessarily a misinterpretation. It's just like a misquote. He gripped Rowan warmly on the shoulder. "And I wish you gain much." Then he stood back, signaled the others to advance, and they began to beat Rowan to a pulp. So, yeah. This is normally how I guess some initiations could go, where they like physically beat you down. Others might be just like telling you suck, telling you that you're an awful person, picking apart all your weaknesses and playing on them and pushing them. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical. If this were the age of mortality, the initiation could be to go kill someone, really go kill someone or murder someone. But that's like that's like the goal. For this gang, killing someone is the goal. So they're beating him down physically so he can know what true pain feels like without nanites in his blood to heal him or to stop him from feeling pain. Recovery without the aid of healing nanites was slow, miserable process that seemed to get worse before it got better. The first day, Rowan longed to die. The second day, he thought he actually might. His head pounded, his thoughts swam. He slipped in and out of consciousness with very little warning. It was hard to breathe, and he knew he had several broken ribs. And although Scythe Chomsky had painfully popped his dislocated shoulder back into place at the end of his beating, it still ached with each heartbeat. Scythe Volta visited him several times a day. This is why I like Scythe Volta, right? He's visiting him. He's like caring for him. So this is the first instance where I feel like we start to get this compassion from Scythe Volta, from any one of the Scythes in Scythe Goddard's circle. The fact that Volta is going to visit him every day shows compassion, shows that he cares, shows that he has a little bit of a conscience, right? He has empathy. Scythe Volta visited him several times a day. He sat with Rowan, spoon-feeding him soup and blotting where it spilled from his split, swollen lips. There seemed to be a halo around him, but Rowan knew it was just optical damage that caused this effect. He wouldn't be surprised if he had detached retinas. "It burns," he told Volta as the salty soup spilled over his lips. "It does for now," Volta told him with genuine compassion. "But it will pass, and you will be better for it." "How could I be better for any of this?" he asked, horrified at how distorted and liquid his words sounded, as if he were speaking through the blowhole of a whale. Volta fed him another spoonful of soup. 6 months from now, you'll tell me if I was right." He thanked Volta for taking the time to visit him when no one else did. "You can call me Alessandro." "Alessandro," Volta said. "Is that your real name?" Rowan asked. "No, idiot, it's Volta's first name." Rowan supposed that that's as close as anyone got to knowing anyone else in the Scythedom. "Thank you, Alessandro." So, okay, just to backtrack a little bit. Volta is an actual person. We can look up actually. Let's do that. Let's look up who Volta actually was. Alessandro Volta. So each of the scythes take on a patron histrionic, which basically they name themselves after someone great from history. And so Scythe Volta has named himself after Alessandro Giuseppe Antonio, wow, that's a lot, Anastasio Volta, who is an Italian physicist, chemist, and lay Catholic who was a pioneer of electricity. So a physicist, a scientist, and that's what Volta has named himself after. Scythe Goddard, who is Goddard? Robert H. Goddard, maybe? Is a physicist. First liquid-fueled rocket. Okay, so he is the inventor of the world's first jet-fueled rocket, basically liquid-fueled rocket. And that's who Goddard has named himself after. So it's not really like not like a bad guy. Like, none of them are really bad, right? It's not like they're naming themselves after serial killers, right? But maybe that says something about Goddard himself. I don't know. Obviously, Scythe Curie is after Marie Curie, who's a famous scientist. Faraday is from Daniel Faraday, who is another scientist. Again, interesting that they're naming each other. Not this Faraday. This is a character in. Can you guys see this? This is a character in Lost. This is not. Yes, because that also talks about philosophy. But actual Daniel Faraday is not a fictional character, is a real person, a physicist. I think. Is it not Daniel Faraday? Wait, what's Faraday the actual? Wait a minute. Michael Faraday. My goodness. Michael. That's why I got it mixed up with Lost. I watched that show when I was younger and I absolutely loved it. But yes, it is Michael Faraday that Scythe Faraday is named after, not the fictional character Daniel Faraday. He was an English scientist who contributed to the study of electromagnetism. So they've all named themselves after scientists that have had revolutionary inventions or discoveries in science in their field of research. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Rowan or Citra choose as their patron histrionic. And we'll come back to that as we get closer to the end of the book. I think maybe I'll do like a presentation of the different people that they named themselves after, because it'll be interesting to like connect them to the actual character. Okay, Volta. On the evening of the second day, the girl, the one who Goddard said was so important, came into his room between deliriums. What was her name again? Amy? Emmy? Oh yes, Esme. I hate that they did this to you, she said with tears in her eyes, but you'll get better. Of course he'd get better. He didn't have any choice in the matter. In mortal days, one died or recovered. Now, there was only one option. Why are you here? To see how you're getting on, she said. No, I mean here, in this place. She hesitated before she spoke. Then she looked away. Scythe Goddard and his friends came to a mall near where I lived. They gleaned everyone in the food court except for me. Then he told me to come with him, so I did. It didn't explain anything, but it was the only explanation she offered, perhaps the only one she knew. From what Rowan could see, the girl served no discernible function at the estate, yet Goddard gave orders that anyone who ran afoul of her would be severely punished. She was not to be bothered in any way and was allowed free run of the estate. I really hope my stomach is not as loud as me. I won't be a Scythe, he told her. Perhaps... Okay, wait. Back up. She was the biggest mystery he had encountered yet in Scythe Goddard's world. I think you'll be a better Scythe than the others, she told him, but gave no explanation as to why she thought so. Perhaps it was a gut feeling, but she couldn't be more wrong. I won't be a Scythe, he told her. She was the first person he confessed it to. You will if you want to, she said, and I think you'll want to. Then she left him to ponder the pain and the possibility. Scythe Goddard didn't show his face in Rowan's room until day 3. How are you feeling? He asked. Rowan wanted to spit at him, but he knew it would hurt too much and might even bring about a second beating. How do you think I'm feeling? Rowan answered. He sat on the edge of the bed and studied Rowan's face. Come see yourself. Then he helped Rowan out of the bed, and Rowan hobbled to an ornate wardrobe on which was a full-length mirror. Rowan barely recognized himself. His face was so swollen, it was pumpkin-like. Purple bruises all over his face and body were molting into all shades of the spectrum. Here is where your life begins, Goddard told him. Sorry, I got a notification. I just want to make sure I check it. Okay, not sure. Okay. Okay, Rowan barely recognized himself. His face was so swollen it was pumpkin-like. Purple bruises all over his face and body were mottling into shades of the spectrum. Here is where your life begins, Goddard told him. What you see is the boy dying. The man will emerge. That's such a load of crap, Rowan said, not even caring what response it might evoke. Goddard merely raised an eyebrow. Perhaps, but you can't deny this is a turning point in your life, and every turning point must be marked by an event, one that burns itself into you as undeniably as a brand. Now he was branded, yet he suspected this was just the beginning of a much larger trial by fire. The world longs to be like us, Goddard told Rowan, taking and doing what we choose, with neither consequence nor remorse. They would steal our robes and wear them if they could. You have been given an opportunity to become greater than royalty. So at the very least, it requires this rite of passage that I have provided for you. Goddard stood there studying Rowan a few moments more. Then he pulled out the tweaker from his robes. Arms up, legs spread. Rowan took as deep a breath as he could and did as he was told. Goddard wanded him. Rowan felt tingling in his extremities, but when it was done, he didn't feel the warmth of opiates or the deadening of his pain. It still hurts, Rowan told him. Of course it does. I didn't activate your painkillers, just your healing nanites. You'll be as good as new by morning and ready to begin your training. But from this moment on, you'll feel every measure of your body's pain. Why? Rowan dared to ask. What person in their right mind would want to feel that kind of pain? Right-mindedness is overrated, Goddard said. I'd rather have a mind that's clear than one that's right. Well, there you go, folks. That's Goddard's foundation right there. That's his philosophical foundation. I would rather have a mind that's clear than a mind that's right. So he doesn't mind being insane as long as his head's clear enough to go kill people. Psychopathic right there. Psychopathic. So yeah, I don't think that the reader is supposed to have any kind of sympathy for Goddard at any point, right? I mean, he's trying to come off as this savior to Rowan, like I'm giving you this opportunity to learn, to grow, to be better than everyone else, to be better than royalty. He even is the one who heals Rowan, right? Goes to his room to give the nanites, turn the nanites back on so that he can heal. But he very specifically does not turn the painkillers back on because he wants Rowan to feel pain. Why does he want Rowan to feel pain? He wants Rowan to feel pain because he takes pleasure in watching other people feel pain. And he also wants Rowan to be broken down as much as possible, to feel pain that nobody else feels so that he can control him more. That's my guess. In the business of death, we scythes have no competition, unless of course you consider fire. Fire kills just as swiftly and completely as a scythe's blade. It's frightening, but also somehow comforting to know that there's one thing the Thunderhead can't fix. One type of damage that revival centers are powerless to undo. Once one's goose is cooked, it is truly and permanently cooked. Death by fire is the only natural death left. It also never happens, though. The Thunderhead monitors heat on every inch of the planet, and the fighting of fires often begins before anyone can even smell smoke. There are safety systems in every home and every office building, with multiple levels of redundancy just in case. The more extreme tone cults try to burn their deadish to make it permanent, but ambudrones usually get to them first. Isn't it good to know that we are all safe from the threat of the inferno? Except, of course, when we're not. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. This seems like, why are you putting this journal entry here? Why is she talking about how fire is the last natural death left? This is foreshadowing. There's something about fire that's going to come up later in this book. Okay? This is important. That fire is the only natural death left. That this person, if they really wanted to die and didn't want to go have a scythe take their life, they could burn to death and not be revived. She even says the tone cults try to cremate the members that die, like even accidentally. to like make it permanent, but there's so much safety measures that no one really ever dies of fire. But doesn't mean it couldn't happen. So keep that in the back of your mind. Chapter 22, Sign of the Bident. Ooh, okay, so now the tone cults are coming in. I'm so excited. I love the tone cults, and you will too, or you won't. I don't know, but we'll see how it goes. Citra's days were filled with training and gleaning. Each day, Citra would go out with Scythe Curie to towns that were selected completely at random. She would watch as the Scythe prowled the streets and malls and parks, becoming like a lioness in search of a vulnerable prey. Citrus learned to see the sign of the stagnant, as Scythe Curie called them, although Citra was not as convinced as she about their readiness to be gleaned. Citra wondered how many of her own days had been filled with the world weariness before becoming an apprentice to death. If Scythe Curie had come across Citra on one of those days, would the woman have gleaned her? Excuse me. They passed an elementary school one day, as it was letting out, and Citra had a sinking feeling that she would glean one of the students. "I never glean children," Scythe Curie told her. "I've never found a child who seemed stagnant. But even if I did, I wouldn't do it. I've been admonished in conclave about it, but they've never taken disciplinary action against me, because why would they, right? To not glean children is like, nobody can reset to a time before they're a child, to when they're a child. So why would you glean people who just arrived on the earth?" That's a good philosophical foundation to have for Scythe Curie, to not glean children. It's incredibly sad when children die today. We don't want it to happen. Nobody ever wants children to die because they are so young and haven't experienced the world. It's just awful, right? And I think Scythe Curie, she knows that. And she's like, no, I'm not going to cross that line. She even says they could have brought me out and disciplined more, but they haven't. Because why would they? Because nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be the person like, you need to go kill more children, right? Nobody wants that. Nobody wants you to say that. Nobody wants to say that to you. Even in this, I think, future, even in the Scythedom. Scythe Faraday had no such rule. He had been strictly about statistics from the age of mortality. Fewer pre-adolescents died in those days, but they did die on occasion. In their time together, Citra had known him to only do one such gleaning. He did not invite Rowan or her, and at dinner that night, he broke into uncontrollable sobbing and had to excuse himself. If Citra was ordained, she vowed to follow a policy like Scythe Curie, even if it got her into trouble with the selection committee. Good people right there. I mean, even Scythe Faraday, who's like, I'm going to glean according to the math, I'm going to do the statistics, even he has trouble with it, right? He doesn't bring Rowan or Citra with him. He just completely breaks down, right? It's not something anybody wants to deal with. Almost every night, she and the Scythe would prepare dinner for mourning family members. Most would leave with their spirits lifted. Some would remain inconsolable, resentful, hateful, but they were in the minority. Such was life and death for Citra in the days before the harvest conclave. She couldn't help but think of Rowan and wonder how he was faring. She longed to see him, but she dreaded it at the same time, because she knew in a few short months she'd be seeing him for the last time, one way or another. And she held on to the narrow hope that if she could prove Scythe Faraday was taken out by a fellow Scythe, perhaps that could be a monkey wrench hurled into the relentless gearworks of the Scythedom, a monkey wrench that would free Citra from having to glean or be gleaned by Rowan. That's right. So, going back to earlier, Citra comes up with this idea that maybe Scythe Faraday did not self-glean, did not kill himself. Maybe he was murdered, like Scythe Curie gave her the word. And she's thinking maybe she'll be able to track it down in the Thunderhead, which is the cloud, the thing that sees everything. Most of the bereaved that Citra had to notify were the same: husbands, wives, children, parents. At first, she had resented that Scythe Curie made her the front line for these heartbroken people, but soon she came to understand why. It wasn't so that Scythe Curie could avoid it, but so that Citra could experience it and learn how to show compassion in the face of tragedy. It was emotionally exhausting, but rewarding. It was preparing her to be a Scythe. Only one time did her post-gleaning experience differ. The first part of her job was tracking down the immediate family of the gleaned. There was one woman who seemed to have no immediate family, just one estranged brother. It was odd in this time when extended families were more often than not a convoluted web that spanned 6 living generations or more. Yet this poor woman had only a brother. Citra mapped out the address, went there, but wasn't paying all that much attention. She didn't know where she was until she was right in front of the place. It wasn't a home, not in the traditional sense. It was a monastery, a walled adobe compound styled after the historical missions. But unlike those ancient structures, the symbol at the apex of the central steeple was not a cross, but a 2-pronged tuning fork, the bident. It was a sign of the tone cults. Okay, Citra's gonna get to experience the tonists and the tone cults. It's the only kind of religion in this world. This was a tonist monastery. Citra shivered in the way anyone shivers at the prospect of something vaguely alien and darkly mystic. Stay away from those lunatics, her father once told her. People get sucked in and are never seen again. Which was a ridiculous thing to say. No one truly disappears in this day and age. The Thunderhead knows exactly where everyone is at all times. Of course it doesn't have to tell. Under other circumstances, Citra might have heeded her father's advice, but she was making a bereavement call, and that trumped any trepidation. She entered the compound through a gated arch. The gate wasn't locked. She found herself in a garden full of white, rich-smelling flowers, gardenias. Tone cults were all about aromas and sounds. They gave little value to the sense of sight. In fact, the more extreme tonist groups actually blinded themselves, and the Thunderhead reluctantly allowed it, preventing their healing nanites from restoring sight. It was awful, and yet was one of the few expressions of religious freedom left in a world that had laid its various gods to rest. Citra followed a stone path through the garden to the church on which stood the sign of the fork, and she pushed her way through the heavy oak doors into a chapel lined with pews. It was dim, even though there were stained-glassed windows on either side. They were not from the mortal age, but were tonist in nature. They depicted various strange scenes: a shirtless man carrying a huge tuning fork on his burdened back, a stone fracturing and shooting forth bolts of lightning, crowds running from a nasty, vermiform creature in the form of a double helix that spiraled out of the ground. She didn't like the images and didn't know what these people believed, only that it was laughable, ludicrous. Everyone knew that this so-called religion was just a hodgepodge of mortal age faiths slapped together into a troubling mosaic. Yet somehow, there were people who found that strange ideological mosaic to be enticing. Okay, so she sees these stained glass walls on the church, or stained glass windows in the church, and they depict different images, kind of like a modern day, like one of our churches, modern day church would look like, with the scenes from the Bible, or from that religion's religious text. So what's interesting is that she mentions a shirtless man carrying a huge tuning fork on his burdened back. Could be similar to the image of Jesus Christ carrying the cross when he's being put to death. A stone fracturing and shooting forth bolts of lightning. I think there's like a stone that breaks in the Bible. I don't know my Bible that well, so sorry. But that's, again, it seems like a biblical image. And then the last one is interesting. Crowds running from a nasty vermiform creature in the form of a double helix that spiraled out of the ground. That's really interesting because it's almost like it's saying that genetics, right? Like are the people in this world messing with genetics because they have blood healing nanites, you know? It almost is saying like the Tonists believe that this is the monster that has come to kill humans, right? Like this is the devil almost, the villain of their religion. Let's see if the Tonist responds to any of these images to Citra, because I imagine that she's going to have some questions for him. A priest or monk, or whatever you call a cult clergyman, was at the altar chanting in monotone and dousing lit candles one by one. "Excuse me," Citra said. Her voice was much louder than she meant it to be, a trick of the chapel's acoustics. The man wasn't startled by her. He put out one more candle, then set down his silver snuffer and hobbled toward her with a pronounced limp. She wondered if it was affected, or if his religious freedom allowed him to retain whatever scarring caused the limp. By the wrinkles on his face, she could tell he was long overdue to turn a corner. "I am Curate Beauregard," he said. "Have you come for atonement?" Atonement. Ah, that's cute. I love that. Atonement. Get it? Because it's a tone cult. Atonement. Atonement. I don't know if that's a vocabulary word. Atonement means to like be forgiven or ask forgiveness for something. To confess almost. "No," she told him, showing her armband that bore the seal of the Scythes. "I need to speak to Robert Ferguson." "Brother Ferguson is in afternoon repose. I shouldn't disturb him." "It's important," she told him. The curate sighed. "Very well. That which comes can't be avoided." Then he hobbled off, leaving Citra alone. She looked around, taking in the strange surroundings. The altar in the front contained a granite basin filled with water, but the water was cloudy and foul-smelling. Just behind that was a focal point of the entire church, a steel two-pronged fork, similar to the one on the roof outside. This bident was 6 feet tall and protruded from an obsidian base. Beside it, on its own little platform, sat a rubber mallet resting on a black velvet pillow. But it was the bident that held her attention. The huge tuning fork was cylindrical, silvery, smooth, and cold to the touch. I feel like we need to have some like singing bowls music right now. Like meditation music almost. Here we go. Sound bath. This is what the tonists listen to, not this. There we go. Yes. Here we go. Healing vibrations. Okay. The huge tuning fork was cylindrical, silvery smooth, and cold to the touch. "You want to strike it, don't you? Go on. It's not forbidden." Citra jumped and slightly chided herself for being caught off guard. "I am Brother Ferguson," said the man as he approached. "You wanted to see me?" "I am the apprentice of Honorable Scythe Marie Curie," Citra told him. "I've heard of her. I'm here on a bereavement mission." "Go on." "I'm afraid that your sister, Marissa Ferguson, was gleaned by Scythe Curie today at 1:15 p.m. I am very sorry for your loss." The man didn't seem upset or shocked, merely resigned. "Is that all?" "Is that all? Didn't you hear me? I just told you that your sister was gleaned today." The man sighed. "That which comes can't be avoided." If she didn't already dislike the tonists, she certainly did now. "Is that it?" she asked. "Is that all your people's holy line? Is that your people's holy line?" "It's not a line. It's just a simple truth we live by." "Yeah, whatever you say. You'll need to make arrangements for your sister's body because that's coming, and it can't be avoided either." Citra with the snap back. "But if I don't step forward, won't the Thunderhead provide a funeral?" "Don't you care at all?" The man took a moment before answering. "Death by Scythe is not a natural death. We tonists do not acknowledge it." Citra cleared her throat, biting back the verbal reaming she wanted to give him, and did her best to remain professional. "There's one more thing. Although you didn't live with her, you are her only documented relative. That entitles you to a year of immunity from gleaning." "I don't want immunity," he said. Why am I not surprised? This was the first time she had ever encountered anyone who refused immunity. Even the most downhearted would kiss the ring. "You've done your job. You may go," Brother Ferguson said. There was only so long Citra could restrain her frustration. She couldn't yell at the man. She couldn't use her Bakator moves to kick him in the neck or take him down with an elbow slam. So she did the only thing she could do. She picked up the mallet and put all of her anger into a single, powerful strike at the tuning fork. Bong! The fork resounded so powerfully she could feel it in her teeth and her bones. It rang not like a bell, which was a hollow sound, This tone was full and dense. It shocked the anger right out of her, diffused it. It made her muscles loosen, her jaw unclench. It echoed in her brain, her gut, and her spine. The tone rang much longer than such a thing should, then slowly began to fade. She had never experienced anything that was quite so jarring and soothing at the same time. All she could say was, "What was that?" G sharp, said Brother Ferguson. Although there's a standing argument among the brethren that it's actually A flat. There's a musical joke in there somehow, and I don't get it. The fork was still ringing faintly. If you like music and you get the joke, good for you. Claps for you. We'll give you a nice little applause for that one. No, maybe not. There we go. Good job. The fork was still ringing faintly. Citra could see it vibrating, making its edge look blurry. She touched it, and the moment she did, it fell silent. "You have questions," said Brother Ferguson. "I'll answer what I can." Citra wanted to deny that she had any questions whatsoever, but suddenly she found that she did. "What do you people believe?" "We believe many things." "Tell me one." "We believe that flames were not meant to burn forever." Citra looked to the candles by the altar. "Is that why the curate was dousing candles?" "Part of our ritual, yes." "So you worship darkness?" "No," he said. "That's a common misconception. People use that to vilify us. What we worship are the wavelengths and vibrations that are beyond the limits of human sight. We believe in the great vibration and that it will set us free from being stagnant." Stagnant. It was the word Scythe Curie used to describe the people she chose to glean. Brother Ferguson smiled. "Indeed. Something resonates in you now, doesn't it?" She looked away, not wanting to meet his intrusive gaze, and found her eyes settling on the stone basin. She pointed to it. "What's with the dirty water?" "That's primordial ooze. It's brimming with microbes. Back in the age of mortality, this single basin could have wiped out entire populations. It was called disease." "I know what it's called." He dipped a finger into the slimy water and swirled it around. "Smallpox, polio, Ebola, anthrax, they're all in here, but it's harmless to us now. We couldn't get sick if we wanted to." He raised his finger from the foul sludge and licked it off. "Gross! You don't need to do that. We get the picture. We get it. We know you don't get sick. Okay?" "Gross. I could drink down the whole bowl and it wouldn't even give me indigestion. Alas, we can no longer turn water into worm." Citra laughed without another word. "Yeah, me too. I would be vomiting." Citra laughed without another word and without turning back. But for the rest of the day, she couldn't get the stench of that foul-smelling water out of her nostrils. Yeah, gross. Okay, I only have a little bit of time left. And this next chapter is really long. It's long enough that I'm not going to be able to get through it. So, I'm going to stop here for today. And we will come back to the rest of chapter 3 tomorrow. And chapter 3, we don't have far to go in chapter 3. 100 pages. I think I can do 100 pages in the time that I have given myself. So, yeah. So we'll do, how far did we get though today? 227. Started at, okay. Oh, I didn't get quite through 100 pages today. Okay, maybe I wanted to get to chapter 25, but I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get to it today. One more chapter. We're going to do one more chapter. I think. I'm thinking really hard right now about this. Oh, I'm over time. I'm over my time. Yeah, we're going to do one more chapter. I'm going to do one more chapter. So we're going to get through chapter 23 and stop right before chapter 24. Yeah, I've got enough time for that. And then we'll pick up tomorrow. And I'm sure we'll be able to get through the rest of part 3 tomorrow. Okay. We're sticking with Citra for this last chapter. The business of the Thunderhead is no business of mine. The Thunderhead's purpose is to sustain humanity. Mine is to mold it. The Thunderhead is the root, and I am the shears, pruning the limbs into fine form, keeping the tree vital. We are both necessary, and we are mutually exclusive. I do not miss my so-called relationship with the Thunderhead, nor do the junior Scythes I've come to see as my disciples. The absence of the Thunderhead's uninvited intrusions into our lives is a blessing, for it allows us to live without a safety net, without the crutch of a higher power. I am the highest power. I know, and I like it that way. And as for my gleaning methods, which now and then have been brought under scrutiny, I say merely this. Excuse me. Is it not the job of the gardener to shape the tree as much as possible? And shouldn't branches that begin to reach unreasonably high be the first to be pruned? From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Goddard. Again, insight into Goddard's perspective on this, right? He's putting himself above the Thunderhead, above the AI that controls everything, the god of the world, right? He's putting himself above. The Thunderhead is the tree, and I am the gardener, right? It's not like the other way around or whatever, but he's putting himself above. Okay, chapter 23, The Virtual Rabbit Hole. Just down the hall from Citra's room was a study. Like every other room in the residence, it had windows on multiple sides, and like everything else in Scythe Curie's life, was kept in perfect order. There was a computer interface there, which Citra used for her studies, because unlike Faraday, Scythe Curie did not shun the digital when it came to learning. As a Scythe's apprentice, Citra had access to databases and information that most people didn't. The backbrain, it was called, all the raw data within the Thunderhead's memory, was not organized for human consumption. Before her apprenticeship, when she did a standard search for things, the Thunderhead would invariably intrude, saying something like, "I see you are searching for a gift. May I ask for whom? Perhaps I can help you find something appropriate." Sometimes she would let the Thunderhead help her. Other times she enjoyed searching alone. But since becoming a Scythe's apprentice, the Thunderhead had gone disturbingly mute, as if it were nothing more than its data. "You'll have to get used to that," Scythe Faraday had told her early on. "Scythes cannot speak to the Thunderhead, and it will not speak to us. But in time, you'll come to appreciate the silence and self-reliance that comes from its absence." Now more than ever, she could have used the Thunderhead's AI guidance as she browsed through its data files, because the worldwide public camera system seemed designed to thwart her efforts. Her attempts to track Scythe Faraday's movements on the day he died was proving harder than she thought. Video records in the backbrain were not organized by camera or even by location. It seemed the Thunderhead linked them by concept. A moment of identical traffic patterns in completely different parts of the world were linked. Footage featuring people with similar strides were linked. One strand of associations led to images of increasingly spectacular sunsets, all caught by street cams. The Thunderhead's digital memory, Citra came to realize, was structured like a biological brain. Every moment of every video record was connected to 100 others by different criteria, which meant that every connection Citra followed led her down a rabbit hole of virtual neurons. It was like trying to read someone's mind by dissecting their cerebral cortex. It was maddening. The Scythedom, she knew, had created its own algorithms for searching the unsearchable contents of the backbrain, but Citra couldn't ask Scythe Curie without making her suspicious. The woman had already proven that she could see through any lie Citra put forth. So best not to be in a position where Citra would have to lie. The search began as a project, quickly evolved into a challenge, and now was an obsession. Citra would secretly spend an hour or two each day trying to find footage of Scythe Faraday's final moments, but to no avail. She wondered if, even in its silence, the Thunderhead was watching what she did. "My, oh my, you've been picking through my brain," it would say if it were allowed, with a virtual wink. "Naughty, naughty." Then, after many weeks, Citra had an epiphany. If everything uploaded to the Thunderhead was stored in the backbrain, then not just public records were there, but personal as well. She couldn't access other people's private records, but anything she uploaded would be available to her, which meant she could seed the search with data of her own. There is no actual law that says I can't visit my family while I'm an apprentice. Citra brought it up in the middle of dinner one night with neither warning nor context of conversation. It was her intent to blindside Scythe Curie with it. She could tell it worked because of the length of time it took Scythe Curie to respond. She took 2 whole spoonfuls of soup before saying a thing. "It is our standard practice, and a wise one, if you ask me. It's cruel. Didn't you already attend a family wedding?" Citra wondered how Scythe Curie knew that, but wasn't about to let herself be derailed. "In a few months, I might die. I think I should have a right to see my family a few times before then." Scythe Curie took 2 more spoonfuls of soup before saying, "I'll consider it." In the end, she agreed, as Citra knew she would. After all, Scythe Curie was a fair woman, and Citra had not lied. She did want to see her family, so the Scythe could not read deceit in Citra's face because there was none. But of course, seeing her family wasn't Citra's only reason for going home. Everything on Citrus Street looked the same as she and Scythe Curie strode down it, yet everything was different. A faint sense of longing tugged at her, but she couldn't be sure what she longed for. All she knew was that walking down her street suddenly felt like she was walking in some foreign land where the people spoke a language she didn't know. They rode the elevator up to Citra's apartment with a pudgy woman with a pudgier pug who was positively terrified. The woman, not the dog. The dog couldn't care less. Mrs. Yeltner, that was her name. Before Citra left home, Mrs. Yeltner had reset her lipid point to Okay, we're just gonna back up. Mrs. Yeltner had reset her lipid point to svelte. But apparently procedure was struggling against a gluttonous appetite because she was bulging in all the wrong places. "Hello." That's weird. I don't want to get into all of that. If you want to look up all those words, go for it. "Hello, Mrs. Yeltner," Citra said, guilty to be enjoying the woman's thinly veiled terror. Good to see you," she said, clearly not remembering Citra's name. "Wasn't there just a gleaning on your floor earlier this year? I didn't think it was allowed to hit the same building so soon." "It's allowed," Citra said, "but we're not here to glean today." "Although," added Scythe Curie, "anything's possible." Oh, Scythe Curie. When the elevator reached her floor, Mrs. Yeltner actually tripped over her dog in a hurry to get out. It was Sunday. Both of Citra's parents and her brother were home waiting. The visit wasn't a surprise, but there was a surprise on her father's face when he opened the door. "Hi, Dad," Citra said. He took her into his arms in a hug that felt warm, but yet obligatory as well. "We've missed you, honey," said her mother, hugging her as well. Ben kept his distance and just stared at the Scythe. "We were expecting Scythe Faraday," her father said to the lavender-clad woman. "Long story," said Citra. "I have a new mentor now." Then Ben blurted out, "You're Scythe Curie." "Ben," chided her mother, "don't be rude." "But you are, aren't you? I've seen pictures. You're famous." The Scythe offered a modest grin. "Infamous is more accurate." Mr. Terranova gestured to the living room. "Please, come in." But Scythe Curie never crossed the threshold. "I have business elsewhere," she said, "but I'll return for Citra at dusk." She nodded to Citra's parents, winked at Ben, then turned to leave. The moment the door was closed, both her parents seemed to fold just a bit, as if they had been holding their breath. "I can't believe you're being taught by the Scythe Curie, the grandma of death." "Grandam, not grandma. I didn't even know she still existed," said Citra's mom. "Don't all Scythes have to glean themselves eventually?" "We don't have to do anything," Citra said, a little surprised at how little her parents knew about how the Scythedom worked. Scythes only self-glean if they want to, or if they're murdered, Citra thought. Her room was the way she had left it, just cleaner. "And if you're not ordained, you can come home and it will be like you never left," her mother said. Citra didn't tell her that either way, she would not be coming home. If she achieved Scythehood, she would probably live with the other junior Scythes. And if she did not become an ordained Scythe, well, she would not live at all. Her parents didn't need to know that. "It's your day," her father said. "What would you like to do?" Citra rummaged through her desk drawer until she found her camera. "Let's go for a walk." The small talk was of the microscopic variety, and although it was good to be with her family, never had the barrier between them felt denser. There were so many things she wished she could talk about, but they never understand, never be able to relate. She couldn't talk to her mother about the intricacies of killcraft. She couldn't commiserate with her father about that moment when the life left a person's eyes. Her brother was the only one she felt remotely comfortable talking to. "I had a dream that you came to my school and gleaned all the jerks," he told her. "Really?" Citra said. "What color were my robes?" He hesitated. "Turquoise, I think." "Then that will be the color I choose." Ben beamed. "What will we call once you've been ordained?" "What will we call you once you're ordained?" her father said, treating it as if it were a certainty. Citra hadn't even considered the question. She'd never heard a Scythe referred to by anything other than their patron histrionic, or Your Honor. Were family members bound to that as well? She hadn't even chosen her patron yet. She dodged the question by saying, "You're my family, you can call me whatever you like," hoping that was true. They strolled around town. Although she didn't tell them, they passed the small home where she had lived with Rowan and Scythe Faraday. They passed the train station nearest the house, and everywhere they went, Citra made a point to take a family picture, each from an angle very close to that of the nearest public camera. The day was emotionally exhausting. Citra wanted to stay longer, and yet a big part of her couldn't wait for Scythe Curie to arrive. She resolved not to feel guilty about that. She had more than her share of guilt. Guilt is the idiot cousin of remorse, Scythe Faraday had been fond of saying. So true. So true. Scythe Curie didn't ask Citra any questions about her visit on the way home, and Citra was content not to share. She did ask the Scythe something, though. "Does anyone ever call you by your name?" "Other Scythes, ones I'm friendly with, will call me Marie, as in Marie Curie. My patron, histrionic, was a great woman. She coined the term radioactivity and was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize, back when such things were awarded." "But what about your real name, the one you were born with?" Scythe Curie took her time answering. Finally, she said, "There's no one in my life who knows me by that name." "What about your family? They must still be around. After all, they have immunity from gleaning as long as you're alive." She sighed. "I haven't been in touch with my family for more than 100 years. Citra wondered if that would happen to her. Do all Scythes lose the ties to everyone they had known? Everything they had been before they were chosen? "Susan," Scythe Curie finally said. "When I was a little girl, they called me Susan. Susie, Sue. It's a pleasure to meet you, Susan." Citra found it next to impossible to imagine Scythe Curie as a little girl. When they got home, Citra uploaded her pictures to the Thunderhead without worrying if the Scythe saw, because there was nothing unusual or suspicious about that. Everyone uploaded their photos. It would have been suspicious if she hadn't. Then, later that night, when Citra was sure Scythe Curie was asleep, she went to the study, got online, and retrieved the pics, which was easy to do since they were tagged. Then she dove into the backbrain, following all the links the Thunderhead had forged to her images. She was led to other pictures of her family, as well as other families that resembled hers in some way. Expected. But there were also links to videos taken by street cams in the same location. That's just what she was looking for. Once she created her own algorithm to sort out the irrelevant photos from the street cams, she had a full complement of surveillance videos. Of course, she was still left with millions of randomly accessed, unordered files, but at least now they were all street cam records of Scythe Faraday's neighborhood. She uploaded an image of Scythe Faraday to see if she could isolate videos in which he appeared, but as she suspected, nothing came back. The Thunderhead's hands-off policy when it came to Scythes meant that Scythe's images were not tagged in any way. Still, she had successfully narrowed the field from billions of records to millions. However, tracking Scythe Faraday's movements on the day he died was like trying to find a needle in a field of haystacks that stretched to the horizon. Even so, she was determined to find what she was looking for, no matter how long it took. Okay, we're going to stop there for today, but Citra is coming through with her smarts and figuring out how she can find out what happened to Scythe Faraday, because she is pretty much determined to believe that he didn't self-glean, right? From the moment that she hears the news that he killed himself, she doesn't believe it. She's like, there's no way he would kill himself. And she's right. There's no way that a grown man who's lived for so many years would give up his entire life just for some teenagers, right? It's kind of this seems kind of backwards, right? It doesn't seem like Scythe Faraday to do that, right? To give up his literal life for them, especially since he didn't finish training them, especially since they've been taken under by other sides. Citra's right to feel that there's some foul play at hand, and she is going to track it down. And that's what we're going to see in the next chapter, or in the next part of part 3. We're going to see Citra really just like questioning the whole Scythedom and like going off on her own path and figuring stuff out on her own, because she's like, I know what to do. I know what to look for. I'm super smart. And she is. And you're also going to have Rowan go through this incredibly horrific experience being groomed by Scythe Goddard and what it does to him. But he is still also making his own path as well. He is not completely under the influence of Scythe Goddard. As we can see, he still absolutely hates the man, has no goodwill toward him, and is already saying he's going to throw the competition so that Citra will win because he doesn't want to kill her. So we are going to see both of them kind of take off on their own paths and mess things up and create change, create a revolution. Yeah, I'm super excited to continue on to the rest of part 3 in this book. It's going to get even more twisty, even more crazy, even more intense, and it's already that way. So if you haven't read up to this part already, please go out, buy the book, get it, read the rest of the series. That's what I'm going to do after I finish this. And yeah, enjoy your afternoons. I am going to go get some lunch and enjoy my afternoon as well. So I hope you have a great time. Thanks for stopping by. If you're watching this video, make sure to like and subscribe and all of that fun YouTube stuff. And I'll see you in class. Bye.